Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight we enter the frozen silence of Alaska, where nights stretch on forever, the cold cuts deeper than bone, and the wilderness hides things you were never meant to see. These are 6 disturbing true Alaskan horror stories, shadows that move without bodies, voices that whisper names they shouldn't know, and footsteps in the snow when no one is there. This is a brand new channel, and this month my goal is 2,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of people who watch never subscribe. They just vanish into the cold. Don't be one of them. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Because in Alaska's darkness, once you leave, you might not come back. Kill the lights. Mute the world. Let's begin. If you've never been caught in a true whiteout, let me explain something people forget. It isn't just the snow, it's the sound. The wind turns the world into a single long note that never stops. It gets inside your hat, inside your mouth. You can't think because there's nothing to think with, just that one. Endless sound and the feeling that the world has shrunk to the 6 inches in front of your eyelashes. I was 24 and dumb enough to believe I wasn't. My friend Nate and I had planned a late-season hunt up near the Talkeetna foothills. It was that shoulder stretch between fall and real winter when the rivers are skinning over, and the weather reports read like coin flips. We'd been out for 2 days and hadn't seen more than some moose sign and a fox that looked like it had lost a bet with a trap. We parked Nate's old F-150 off a logging spur and hiked in with too much optimism and not enough sense. We split up that morning, like idiots do. The plan was simple. Loop opposite arcs around a low ridge and meet back at a flagged spruce by mid-afternoon. By noon, the clouds bellied down and the light went flat. By 1, snow started as a friendly opinion and turned into a verdict. I tried the little handheld radio we used when phones went dead. All I got was static and a weather report that sounded like it was being read from underwater. I called Nate's name once into the wind, and that felt wrong immediately, like teaching something where you were. The world went white. The dark of the trees dissolved and depth disappeared. I could hear my own breathing too loud, the rasp inside the balaclava, and the wind grinding through the branches like a metal file. I did what they tell you to do when you don't have a GPS or a brain. I picked a bearing east, toward where the road had to be, and I walked it like the last religion on earth. I found the cabin by hitting the corner of the porch with my shin. It came up out of the storm the way a dock appears out of fog. Sudden, solid, like it had always been there, and you were the surprise. It was one of those old trapper places, low and mean, the logs gray as dead teeth, a cross-buck door with an antler peg for a handle. The roof was loaded with snow except where the wind had shaved it down to a hard crust, and the eaves had icicles as thick as my wrist. I knocked because that's what you do when a place looks like it might have a story that isn't yours. 3 times. The wind answered. I tried the latch. Inside, the first thing I felt was the absence of the wind, which is its own kind of noise. Then I smelled old wood and something like animal fat, cold and greasy. It wasn't dark, not exactly. Light made it through a little window on the lee side, a square of day that looked like stale milk. There was a short iron stove with a pipe that disappeared up into the roof, a cot with a wool blanket that had gone stiff on the corners, a shelf with a tin cup, a cracked plate, and a mason jar with something cloudy in it. Snow sifted through cracks and laid a dandruff line along the sill. My hands didn't feel like mine. I set down my rifle, stamped my boots, and told the room I was only staying until the wind let me think again. People do that. They talk to empty rooms like the rooms might have opinions. There was tinder in the stove, birch curls old and dry enough to whisper when I touched them. I built a fire the way you practice on calm days for the one day it counts. And when the flame caught and found the first piece of split spruce, the cabin changed its shape. It got smaller and friendlier. The iron creaked. The shadows decided where they were going to live. Heat reached for my face and hurt a little, the way it does when you're thawing too fast. I hung my gloves on a nail by the stove and took off my outer jacket. Steam rose from me like I'd been exhaling my whole body. I wanted to sit down and sleep for a week, but that's a good way to never get up. I took stock instead. The door had a bar you could drop into iron brackets. I left it up. A trapper's axe leaned in the corner. There were snares coiled on a peg, each loop a neat little mouth waiting to close. The first odd thing was so small I almost missed it. The ashes in the stove weren't old. You know how cold ash is gray, a little light when you brush it? These were darker, with a faint shine of oil where heat has been. Not warm exactly, but not ancient. The second was the mason jar. I assumed cloudy water. I held it up to the window and saw fat floating on top, cloudy flakes that shifted when the light hit. I set it down and didn't think about it. I didn't want to think about it. I checked the corners because that's another thing you do. There was a trap door near the cot, half hidden under a rag rug that had forgotten what color it used to be. The kind of door that makes you think about root cellars and worse things pretending to be root cellars. The ring pull felt cold through my glove. It stuck. I told myself frozen wood and left it alone. If there was food down there, it wasn't mine. By late afternoon, the wind got its second wind. The sound found a new register, a kind of undertone that was lower than you can hear so much as you feel. The little window went from milk to chalk. The fire told me I didn't have to be brave for a little while. I ate a granola bar like it was the last food on earth and promised myself I'd be awake when it got dark. When I woke up, the door was barred. The night had taken the cabin in hand. The fire had collapsed into an angry red core and the rest of the room was theirs. My head went straight from asleep to awake without any middle. I was sitting in the chair by the stove because I hadn't meant to sleep and my neck told me so. The first thought was stupid. How much wood do I have left? And the second was there's a line of metal across the door that wasn't there before. I didn't stand up. I didn't breathe much. I listened the way you do in the woods when you're sure what you heard was a footfall and not a branch. The cabin creaked, wood talking to heat and cold. Wind looked for new places to put itself, worrying at the eaves. My own heart was too loud. I got up like you get up when you're in a theater and you have to pass too many knees. I went to the door. The iron had been lifted onto the brackets and dropped. I had to touch it to believe it. It was cold enough to burn. I lifted it and set it aside. That was it. No fanfare. Nobody clapped. I told myself I must have done it before sleeping, not remembering. I said the words out loud. People will say anything if they say it out loud enough. I fed the stove, coaxed the coals back into flame, and checked the radio. Static. The kind that is all the stations at once and none of them. I said Nate's name and something that might have been my name came back, stretched thin by distance or my own fear. I held out until midnight by reading the little notches someone had carved into the table. Not letters, tally marks. Groups of 5 four-sets, a slash separating them, then more. The knife that made them must have been sharp. The cuts were clean and pale like bone. I stopped counting when I realized the last set wasn't finished. When I had to piss, I used a coffee can because I wasn't opening that door to the dark and the wind and whatever knew my name well enough to send it back to me. I dropped the door bar again without noticing I'd done it. When I looked up, it was there, like drifting off a highway onto the rumble strip and not remembering the last 2 miles. The human brain is a gift until it decides it's a babysitter. The cabin started to breathe. You'll think I mean this in some poet way, but I don't. I mean it expanded with the heat and shrank with the cold, and for a minute or two, the rhythm lined up with my breathing. My chest rose. The walls seemed to ease outward. My chest fell. The logs sighed back. I told myself wood does that. Houses do that in winter. The stove snapped once, and it sounded like somebody clicking their tongue in disapproval. Around 2, the knocking started from under the floor. Soft, 3 taps. Someone with patience. I stared at the trapdoor like you stare at the spot on your skin where you felt the spider. I said very quietly, "There's nobody down there." And the knocking came again, 3 like a kid learning a pattern. I stood up. I sat down. I stood up with the axe. The axe was heavy and stupid in my hand. The knocking stopped. I put the axe back where it had been and it started again. 3. You can't walk out into a whiteout by night and live. That's a fact. You can't open a trapdoor that wants to be opened. That felt like a fact too. Sometime before dawn, I fell asleep again in the chair with the axe leaned against my knee and my bootlaces still tied. When I woke, the axe was back in the corner, hung neatly, and my laces were undone. The wind had eased, the way weather does when it's done deciding about you. The window had a hint of color to it, like somebody was rubbing the morning in from the edges. I told myself I'd been sleepwalking, because that was the least dangerous story I could choose. I heated snow in the tin cup and drank water that tasted like rust and pine smoke. I ate another bar. I looked at the tallies on the table and decided to put my own. I cut a single line. Call it superstition. Call it wanting proof that I was still in charge of something that made marks. That's when I noticed footprints that weren't mine. Not outside, inside, on the far side of the room, by the cot. Just impressions in the snow that had dusted in under the door during the night and hadn't been melted by the stove's reach. Boot prints, small. Maybe a woman's, maybe a teenager's, the tread shallow from where. They came from the corner where the cot shadow pooled deepest, went to the trapdoor and stopped. Not over it, not away from it. They just stopped like you stop at a line you don't cross. I said, okay, to nobody, which is another thing people do when they have no idea what else to do. My phone had a sliver of battery if I took the case off and warmed it near the stovetop without melting it. I got 1 bar of nothing. I typed a text to Nate anyway because sometimes the world gets generous at random. Cabin, storm, okay for now. If you don't hear by afternoon, get help. Follow orange flag on low ridge. It sat there with a little blue wheel that spun and didn't care about my life at all. I decided to check outside because daylight can make brave men out of cowards, and because I needed to pee in something that wasn't a coffee can. I opened the door. Cold slid in along the floor like a cat. The world was a blown glass sculpture, clean and hard. The wind had shaved the drifts into shapes that looked carved. The porch steps had vanished. I hopped down into a crust that held me for a second, then gave like a lie. I sank to mid-shin, and the snow bit the gap between sock and boot like it had been waiting. There were tracks in the yard. Not mine, I hadn't been out yet. 2 sets, both old enough to have the edges softened, both drifting toward clean. One came from the trees toward the porch, and the other from the left, crossed it and headed to the back where an outhouse leaned like a confession. I followed the ones to the trees for 20 feet and lost them where the drift had curled up and fallen. I told myself they were from before the storm, from some other hunter. I told myself the cabin wasn't mine, the story wasn't mine, and I was borrowing both. I did what the morning would let me do. I gathered wood from the lean-to, the splits already there like someone had thought ahead for me. I took 2 trips and then a third because the sky had that low round look that means it's only resting. I checked the roof with a long pole and raked off a slab of snow from the edge before it decided to take the stovepipe with it. I walked around to the back and saw the second odd thing I couldn't argue with. A rope nailed along the wall, tied in loops like handholds, going from a nail near the window up to the eave and disappearing over. No ladder, no reason, except if you wanted to get to the roof without leaving prints where somebody could read them. I went back inside and dropped the bar because I was tired of not deciding to. The fire had a good bed going. The cabin warmed. It began to breathe again in that slow, steady way. I shouldn't say it like this, but I will. After a while, I felt less like I was in a cabin and more like I was in the chest of something that had decided I wasn't immediate trouble. Around midday, I heard the first human thing that wasn't me. Not a knock. A voice, or close enough. It came like the wind had learned a word and wanted to practice it. Help. I stood up too fast and saw stars. Hello? It came out like a cough. Nate? Help, the wind said again. But when I opened the door, the word broke up and flew away. White-gray, the black ribs of trees far off. And there, a figure at the edge of the clearing by the first line of spruce. A person. Parka, fur at the hood, one hand lifted. Not waving exactly. Not yet. I took 2 steps out and the figure took 1 backward into the trees. Not running. Not afraid. Like we were playing fair turn by turn. I felt the rope along the back wall of the cabin under my palm even though it was on the other side. I felt the way the trapdoor ring had been cold through my glove. I felt the tallies in the table under my thumbnails. Grooves where someone had counted days or nights or something else that came in sets of 5. I called, "You okay?" Because people are a habit. The figure turned sideways like it wanted me to see that it wasn't the right shape. Not wrong exactly. Too narrow. Too long between shoulder and elbow like a coat hanging off a broom. The hood turned toward me and there was dark inside it where faces go. I went back inside because I'm not as dumb as I was the day before. The bar dropped. Not by itself. I dropped it. The fire sounded too loud for a minute. I thought of the jar on the shelf and wished I hadn't. I turned the radio on and off like that would teach it manners. I said, "Nate, I have a problem." And for a second I thought I heard laughter, but it was the stove drawing hard. By afternoon, the storm decided to have another opinion. The light dropped out of the room like someone cracked the door to a cellar and let the dark up. The cabin tightened and relaxed in a rhythm that no longer matched mine. The knocks came again, 3 at a time, and the prints by the cot melted and reappeared, not possible, not real. They looked wetter, like whoever had made them had come in out of fresh snow and stood there longer, letting the melt cut a sharper edge. I pulled the rug off the trapdoor and stood over it the way I box shoelaces with my toe sometimes. I told the floor, okay, and I pulled the ring. It lifted easy this time, no stubbornness. Cold came up, not like outside, the kind of cold that is still. My breath drifted down and didn't drift back up. There were steps, rough cut, and the dark was a whole thing you could touch. I held the axe and a little LED light that I clicked on with my teeth. The beam cut a cone out of the dust that didn't move. The cellar was about what you think. Dirt floor, shelves along 2 walls with empty jars and a few with something preserved in a color I didn't need to name. There were hanging hooks from the joists where you might hang meat if you weren't too squeamish. On one of the shelves sat a framed photo, glass long gone, the paper yellowing at the edges. The photo showed the cabin from outside, before the porch sagged, before the roof lost its straight. A man and a girl stood in front, both looking like they'd learned to squint early. He had a beard that could have had its own zip code and a hand on her shoulder that looked like it could close on a wolf. She was maybe 14, long braids. Expression like a dare. The girl's boots caught me, the tread shallow, worn down. The same tread, I told myself, or close enough for a storm-tired mind to match things that didn't ask to be matched. I took the photo because that's what you do when you need a reason later to say you weren't making it up. Something moved behind the shelf. Not fast, not big, just the space where something could be making a decision. I stepped back and the light found a string. It ran from one of the hooks across the joist to the far corner and down. A bell hung there, small and plain. No clapper. A piece of dried sinew tied to a nail near the floor had been cut recently, the end clean. A rig for hearing mice or men, for counting them, for tally marks. I went up the steps without running because running in a place like that is a kind of surrender, and I wasn't ready to surrender to anything but my own stupidity just yet. I set the photo on the table by my fresh-cut line. I closed the trapdoor and set the rug back like that would matter to the dark that lived under it. It gets late early in a storm. The last light pulled itself out of the window and the cabin's corners fattened. The breathing found a new cadence. Outside, the figure, or another one, or the same, stood just within the shape of the nearest spruce. I knew because every now and then the wind shifted and the snow stopped moving in front of that one dark vertical shape. I could feel it more than see it, the way you feel someone standing behind you in a line even if they're good at not touching you. I sat in the chair with the axe crosswise on my lap and the radio on. "Help," the wind said once, or the radio did. "Help," the trapdoor said in 3 small knocks, patient like math. The bar was down. The stove breathed. The cabin breathed. I didn't. At some point the door rattled. Not a storm. Not wood swelling. The iron bar bounced slightly in its brackets like something was trying to remember how doors work. The knocking from below answered with 3. The door rattled again and then went still, the way people do when they decide to use another key. The key was the chimney. There's a sound a stove makes when a downdraft shoves its smoke back where it came from. It coughs. The fire fluttered low and a soft drift of soot slid down like ash rainfall. With it came a narrower sound like something rubbing along iron. I looked at the pipe collar where it passed through the roof and saw snow dust coming down, not evenly. Not like wind, but in bursts. I heard a soft thump above me and then the gentle, careful creak of weight testing a span. There's that rope on the back wall, I thought. There's that neat row of loops going up. There's the way you set a ladder with your hands if you don't want footprints where people like to read. I didn't stand directly under the pipe because fear and common sense sometimes go to the same church. I moved sideways 2 steps and the axe weighed my palm down. The pipe whispered a little, and then something thin and dark slid down inside and tapped the baffle like a blind finger. The fire jumped and spit once like it was surprised. The knocking from the trapdoor came once, not 3. Different now, closer. I can't say what happened next in any way that will make you think I didn't just fall asleep and have the kind of dream you tell yourself later didn't happen because otherwise your view of doors never goes back to normal. But I'll say it anyway. Something like a hand, long, thin, skin the color of old meat, reached into the stovepipe from the collar and closed slowly like it was counting the heat. It held there a second and then withdrew. and I heard a scrape back up the pipe like fingernails on iron, patient, not frustrated. Then the figure at the trees moved forward one step and stopped. The trapdoor knocked twice, quick, like a punctuation that knows its grammar. I said, "No," out loud. I said it in the tone you use on a dog headed for the road. I lifted the axe a little. The air in the cabin tightened the way air does right before a fight in a bar you didn't want to be in. Then silence. Not a lack of sound. The big, long wind noise moved off a hair. The stove settled back into its own business, and whatever was standing at the trees remembered something else it had to do. An hour passed. Or a lifetime. Or 10 minutes. I fed the fire when it needed it. I did not sleep. The knocks came once more from below, and I said, "No," again, because I am not that brave, and I think bravery is sometimes just a different flavor of asking to be taken. What got me in the end wasn't fear. It was something like pity. Around 4 in the morning, a different sound came from the trapdoor. Not tapping. Weeping. Or the closest a person can come to a sound that lets you believe weeping might be happening in a place that isn't meant for it. Not loud. Young. I saw the photo on the table in the thin firelight. The girl, braids, boots worn down. I thought of my little sister back in Anchorage, who would have laughed at me for getting myself into this and would have flown out on a broom to drag me by my ear if she could have. I lifted the rug. I lifted the door. I held the axe high. The light skimmed down the steps like something trying not to wake the dark. "Hello?" I said, and the sound I heard back was not human, not animal. It was like the word hello, being spoken by someone who had practiced the shape of it alone for a long time and still couldn't find the vowels. I shut the door. I put the rug back. I put the bar across the door again because it had gotten used to being there. I waited for the dawn like a sinner in a small town waits for the church to open. At a gray hour that had to be morning, the radio found enough of a spine to cough out a voice. Not Nate, a man with too many transmissions in him. Anyone copying near mile 47 of the spur. This is Trooper Keller, report of a vehicle left overnight. Weather break. Will attempt a search. Over. I mashed the transmit like it had insulted my mother. Cabin. I'm at a cabin off mile 40-something, low ridge flagged, stormed in, one occupant, me. I almost said two and didn't know why. I'm okay, kind of okay. Static. Then copy. Sit tight. That phrase that is the same in every state every year. Sit tight like you are a jar that needs its lid checked. I did for 2 more hours. I fed the stove. I told the room I would leave it as I found it and better. I put the photo in my inner jacket pocket. I took one of the snares and coiled it and slid it into my pack, because I'm a thief when I'm afraid. I cut a second tally into the table because the first one needed company. I put the bar up. I opened the door. The figure at the trees wasn't there. Or it was, and it had learned something about shape that let it look like a tree well enough to fool me in daylight. The sky had torn open a little. The wind had decided we could be friends for a morning. A helicopter somewhere was a rumor getting closer. I turned back and looked at the cabin because I wanted to remember it right. The roofline. The porch sag, the way the stovepipe leaned a degree or two like it had been touched. There were prints in the yard now, small and shallow, walking from the porch to the line where the spruce began. They went 3 steps and then stopped. Same as before, like the distance between the cabin and the woods was a kind of border. I looked down at my own prints next to them and thought about how we all find the places we won't cross in the strangest ways. The trooper and a guy from Sayar named Mikey sat down in a field a quarter-mile away because the clearing around the cabin was more a suggestion than a place to land. They came in on snowshoes, red helmets, asking my name, my condition, if anyone else was with me. I said no because that was the safest way to talk. Trooper Keller looked at the cabin like men look at boxes with unknown contents and said he'd send someone later to check property records because he liked knowing who owned the places that tried to own people. We got to the chopper and headset talk made all of us sound like we were underwater. On the lift, I looked back and for a second the cabin looked like it exhaled, the door shifting in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. Mikey thumped my shoulder like we'd both lucked out, and I agreed because sometimes you have to choose the truth that lets you sleep. 2 days later, when Anchorage had weather and power at the same time, I got a text from Nate that had been traveling across whatever passes for a network in hell. You good? Got pinned by storm. Stayed with truck. Troopers found me. I said I was fine, and we both lied by leaving out the rest. Trooper Keller called me a week after that. his voice normal without the headset compression. "We hiked in once the road was passable," he said. "Cabin's as old as sin, no current claim. Lots of signs someone's used it over the years. Strays, hunters, whoever. Took a look in the cellar. Nothing down there but jars and dust and a broken bell. Funny thing, though." "What funny thing?" "That table you told me about with the scratch marks. We saw those. A lot of them old, some fresh. You said you put one on there." He paused like he was reading and didn't like the next paragraph. "We counted. Whole sets of 5, then a slash, then more. Last 2 were different. Clean. New. One looked like a straight cut. The other one right next to it looked like the same cut made by a smaller knife. Or a kid. Or somebody trying to make their hand smaller than it is." He waited for me to say I'd done both. I didn't. I said thank you like a man says thank you to a doctor who can't tell him if the ache is anything but the weather in his bones. I have the photo in a drawer. The man's hand on the girl's shoulder. The braids, the boots worn thin. Sometimes I get it out when the wind pushes down against the windows and makes the house breathe, and I think about driving north again, because that's what a certain kind of man does when something scares him. He goes back to it to prove he's not a collection of his own fears. Then I put it away because I'd like to grow old enough that I can point to a rut in my yard and call it a garden and mean it. If you want proof, I have this. The day after Keller's call, someone left a coil of wire on my porch. Clean, bright new. Snares. The kind you tie with hands that practiced young. No note. No footprints in the yard because it had snowed and then blown them thin as skin. My door rattled that night as the wind remembered me. You can say I was storm stupid and sleepwalking. You can say human beings put themselves in places that teach them the wrong laws. Both are true. But if you ever get turned around by a whiteout up near that stub of road that used to serve log trucks and you find a cabin with an antler peg on the door and a stove that remembers names, don't count the marks on the table. Don't open the trapdoor because you feel sorry for someone who learned hello in a room with no windows. And if you hear 3 knocks from below and a single from the door, answer the one that gets you to morning. That's the only advice I've got. The rest is just breathing with whatever holds you through the night and hoping it keeps time with you long enough to see color come back into the world. I don't care if you think it sounds superstitious. I've been running roads since I was 21, and there are a few rules I don't break. I don't nap with the windows cracked in grizzly country. I don't let my diesel idle next to snow machines without tying down the covers. And I don't talk about the lights unless someone asks first. You're asking. So here it is. I run seasonal contracts up north when the roads go hard and the bush towns want fuel, lumber, and groceries. The year this happened, I'd been pulled onto a job hauling mixed freight to a village on the Yukon. They cut a winter road straight across the river, plow it after each storm. The ice pack's thick enough to hold a rig if you mind the speed and the spacing. If you know, you know. Keep it steady under 25, no harsh braking, no sudden turns that punch the ice. Never stop in the middle. Kill the Jake on approach to the river and ride the grade clean. It had been 40 below for a week. The sort of cold that makes your breath squeal in your nose and your eyelashes go white after one glance into the wind. We staged in a gravel lot outside a caved-in fish plant. Me, a guy named Cal in a blue Kenworth with a chipped hood, and Denise, who could blindside Doc faster than any driver I've worked with. Our dispatcher back in Fairbanks was Mac, full-time chain smoker, part-time drill sergeant. He'd send the run order over text and bark on the radio like we were on a Navy ship instead of sheet ice. The first 2 runs were clean. Daytime, pale sun, no wind. The river was a white runway with willow branches marking the edges like rib bones. You drive by the willows and you feel like a needle threading a big, cold scar. We kept our spacing, 3 minutes between trucks, because momentum is everything. If you go too fast, you throw a pressure wave through the ice that can outpace you and buckle. We crossed without even a ping, refueled the clinic generator, brought grain for the feed store, racked our chains neatly, and got coffee from a woman who ran a cafe out of her living room. You learn names up there because it's polite and because it matters. Hers was Mary. She gave us styrofoam cups so hot they burned our gloves. And she pushed an extra muffin on me for the road back. At the table under the window, an old man with a beard like frost rime stared past us like he was waiting for a storm. He looked at our jackets, our hats, our boots, checked off the parts of us that proved we belonged or didn't. When he decided we were just drivers, he nodded. "Watch for foxes," he said. "They'll pace you. Don't chase their tricks." I laughed because what else do you say to that? Denise didn't. That night, Mac got antsy about a backhaul. There was a pallet of freezer compressors we'd promised to take downriver before the next weather change. The forecast looked iffy, but not suicide. "We can do a night run," he said. "Quick in, quick back, then you all can sleep in Manly." Denise and Cal were game. Money is money. I looked at my odometer and did the math on fatigue. I figured I could make one more. I told myself we'd done the ice twice in daylight. We had it. You get cocky. That's how it happens. We rolled from the gravel lot at 10:12 p.m., air clear enough to see your own breath drift sideways when there was no wind at all. The sky was a hard, dark dome, and the aurora hung like green smoke, slow and quiet. Channel 19 was dead except for us and the occasional lonely pickup. Mac yelled at me through static to make sure my beacon was bright. "Those locals don't need your beacon," he said, "but I do. I don't want to call your wife with bad news. I don't have a wife." He knew that. We lined up, Denise first, then Cal, then me, because I was hauling the lightest and figured more bite on the ice if things got dicey. The access cut to the river is a steep little chute. You ease down and the trees open like a curtain and the world becomes a flat white stage. No sound but your tires whispering sugar under the weight. The willow markers were dulled out by a low ground fog that hugged the snow. I could see the taillights of Cal a few minutes ahead, 2 red pinpricks skating forward and dissolving in the distance. "Slow as smooth," Denise said on the radio. "Smooth as alive." "Copy," I said. The first mile was butter. I breathed with the steering wheel, hands at 9 and 3. No Jake, no sudden feathering. The Yukon under me creaked once, quick and ugly, and then went quiet. If you've never driven a frozen river, you don't know that sound. It's like a door hinge the size of a city far under your boots. It doesn't come from left or right. It comes from everywhere. Halfway across, I saw the first light. I thought it was Cal checking a mirror. It blinked white-blue on my driver's side. Quick story-high pops like a warning strobe caught behind a snow hummock. I dipped my eyes to the dash. Everything looked boring. Normal temp. Fuel treated for cold. Volt steady. My radio hissed and carried on. The light blinked again, lower this time, then ahead, then high. Angles that didn't fit a snow machine or another truck. "Cal," I said, "you got someone behind you playing games?" "Negative," he said. "Just me and Denise." "You seeing those curls on the aurora?" I wanted to say I was seeing something else, but I didn't. Not yet. When you speak something weird out loud on the ice, it gets heavier. Sounds dumb, but we all act like it's true. The white-blue blinked again, and this time it wasn't a blink. It widened and smeared, an oval like a smudge on clean glass. It kept pace with my cab, maybe 10 yards off the driver's side. It wasn't on the ice, and it wasn't in the sky. It was out in that gap, the freezing gray space where your brain has no furniture to put things on. My CB popped, a single crackle like someone pinched the wire. Then it went to blanket static, not loud, just present. Every channel. I turned the dial through numbers like a safecracker and got the same warm, dry hiss. The smaller handheld I kept on the dash, useless. My sat messenger blinked red and refused to wake up. Chill moved up my wrist like wet cuffs. "Denise, say again," I said, but I had the wrong instinct. I was talking to a dead thing. It's hard to explain the next part without sounding like I'm dressing it up. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was the feeling of a hospital waiting room after midnight. It was every light in the world being 2% dimmer for no reason. The oval dragged a little behind the cab, then pulled even with the sleeper. There was no beam, no origin, just a presence that reminded me of being pulled over by the DOT on a dark highway and seeing their flashlight glide along my trailer. Only there was nobody to own it. I could have stopped. I didn't. You don't stop on a river unless you have to, and what was I going to tell Mac? There's a light that wants something? He'd think I'd punched the trailer through a drift and was trying to talk my way out of the embarrassment. The radio static scraped and shifted. It reminded me of pouring salt into a hot pan. It found edges, made shapes. Words don't come clean over static. You know when someone's about to talk because of the little lift in the noise. This was that lift. The sound leaned forward and pressed itself thin, like a face at glass. A whisper came through that wasn't a word, but had the cadence of one. I stared so hard at the willow markers I saw after images. The oil in my engine sounded thick, older than it was. The oval brightened. My dash lights dimmed a shade. The needles ticked and held. My foot shook on the throttle. I eased off, then eased back on, smooth as I could. Another creak from below. You tell yourself it's the cold talking, the ice adjusting, the natural crack. The oval at my window held steady, and then, this is the part I know you'll read twice. It slipped through the glass like the glass wasn't there. Everything in me wanted to flinch right, which would have thrown me off the markers and into the soft edge and maybe down. I locked my arms and let it happen because the only option was letting it happen. The cab temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged and coated the inside of the windshield in a thin, grainy frost. I blinked sweat out of my eyes that shouldn't have been there in that cold. The whisper and the static stopped being in the static. It was in the cab with me up close, the way a mosquito is close when it finds that patch by your ear. I didn't hear a language. I heard intention. The intention was simple. Listen. The engine coughed once, just once. Anybody who's run diesel in the cold will tell you that cough is gasoline to the fear part of your brain. You start quickly inventorying all the ways you prepared. Anti-gel, new filters, winter blend, block heater time. And then you jump to the end of that list and there's just the number 40 written 10 times over. 40 below. 40 below makes its own rules. The engine stuttered again and this time the whole truck shivered. My headlights lost a fraction of their throw. The instrument cluster did that ghostly fade where you see the bulbs instead of the glow. "Don't you die," I said out loud to the machine or the light or both. "Not here." Across the cab, the passenger seat belt did something so normal it didn't register for a second. It pulled out. Slow. Like someone grabbed it with cold fingers and tugged it across their lap. I'm not saying the belt clicked. It didn't. But it moved to the edge of where it would click. The webbing was stiff with the cold and it rubbed against the plastic in a way I have heard 1,000 times when an actual human being is sitting beside me, making sure they're buckled before we hit bad road. I forgot how to breathe in that second, and when I remembered, I fogged the inside of the windshield so bad that my wipers smeared frost. I cracked my window a half-inch without thinking and wind knifed in and burned my teeth. That wind should have knocked some sense into me. It didn't. The oval wasn't oval anymore. It was nothing I can name. The absence of light shape to fit in my passenger seat. The diesel knocked like a fist on drywall and went dead. No jerk, no violent engine kill. Just gone. The sudden silence almost drove me off the markers because your ears pull your hands when noises change that fast. I let the truck coast silent. The kind of silent where you hear your sweater rub your jacket. On a river, in that kind of cold, no engine means seconds count. You can't just sit and think. You have to move in some direction that keeps you alive. But I couldn't make myself touch the key because every instinct I had told me that the moment I tried to wake the engine, something in the passenger seat would reach across and stop my hand. "Hey," I said. "Stupid." I don't know what I thought I was talking to. "Hey." The whisper came back, not from the radio, not from the room, but from whatever occupies that thin layer around people that you only notice when something slips inside it. There was a shape to the sound like 2 syllables. One of them felt like slow. The other felt like something I didn't have a word for, but my body understood it as a direction. In my mirror, a light appeared. Not the oval, an actual headlight. A single warm halogen way back, rising and falling as someone took the approach. "Denise?" I grabbed the key and turned it and said a prayer I haven't said since my father's heart surgery. The diesel tried to cough and failed. I waited, turned again. On the third turn, the truck woke up like someone had taken a hand off its throat. The dash lights jumped. The radio came back hard enough to crackle my eardrums. Denise's voice slammed through. "You copy? Cal's across and waiting. I lost your beacon back there. You scared the hell out of me. Do you copy?" "Copy," I said. I had to swallow 3 times to make my own voice climb my throat. "I had a stall. On the river?" Max screamed in from Fairbanks. He must have been on both radios. "You do not stop on the river." Jesus Christ. "Are your axles in one piece? Do not stop." "I didn't," I said, which was true in the way lies sometimes are. The passenger seat belt sighed back into its nest, slow as a breath out. The frost on the inside of the windshield thinned at the exact same rate the heater ramps usually do when you go from cold start to working. The oval was back out there pacing the cab a little ahead now, pulling toward the far bank like a led dog. It held there steady, not bright, not dim, like something keeping speed for me. And then when the willow markers thickened and the hard-packed ramp rose, the oval lifted, thinned to a line, and zipped straight up so fast my neck flinched. I tasted metal. My hands shook. I rode the ramp too fast and strobed the beacons over the tree line and pulled off into the staging turnout, where I knew there were packed snow shoulders deep enough to hold me. Denise's rig rolled in behind me, then Cal. I set my brakes and my foot couldn't find the pedal the first time. When I did, The familiar Chevere felt like a permission slip to feel my heart again. Denise climbed up on my running board before the door opened. "You go dark for a full minute," she said, breath clouding my interior, eyes bright with anger that was mostly fear. "Don't you ever do that again." "I didn't mean to," I said. I sounded dumb. I scratched useless marks in the frost with my nail. "What happened?" Cal asked. He was calmer. He always is. He leaned his forearms on my window and stared at my face like he was trying to see what the inside of my skull looked like. "I saw the lights," I said, because the truth was a pressure I needed to release. Cal didn't speak. He glanced at Denise and then at the river. He put his gloved hand on my mirror and adjusted it. A hair like that would adjust the world. "Yeah," he said finally. "It's early for them." "What do you mean early?" I asked. He tilted his chin to the north. The aurora had brightened, curled in on itself like green smoke caught in a jar. "Usually they wait until later in the winter. Thicker ice, you believe this?" Denise asked him, half mocking, half bargaining with herself. "Don't start with that bar talk." "I believe that my radio died at the same time his did," Cal said. "And mine came back when his did. And I believe none of us stopped, and yet I watched his beacon go out and come on with no bump, like I was watching my porch light from my kitchen." Mac broke back in, too loud. "I can hear all your little ghost club chat," he said. "Save it for the cafe. Get the freight and get off the river." We did as we were told. The backhaul was a pallet and a half, nothing backbreaking. The folks at the village were grateful enough to overpay and feed us soup. I caught Mary watching me with the careful look you give somebody you're not sure is going to stay upright. The old man with the frost beard made a show of not listening and then said, "You went at night." "We did," I said. He poked at his muffin. "Night belongs to it. Don't worry. It liked you. How do you know? You came back." He smiled without showing teeth. "Not everybody does." On the return, I took the middle position. I wasn't going to be last again. I figured if something was going to pace us, it could pace one of the others. That's how brave I was. I kept my eyes on Cal's taillights and counted seconds out loud between the steering wheel's tiny motions. Nothing happened for the first third. My radio stayed fine. My engine stayed strong and dull. My heart found a rhythm again. Then we hit the long straight where we'd felt the creaks before. The ice sang deep, low as an organ. The willow markers were little black teeth in the fog. The world had that flat, dead feel again, like sound had gone out to look for a place to hide. I waited for the oval. It didn't show. Instead, the shape of my passenger seat changed. If you've ever had someone sit down beside you in a truck, you know how the truck moves. It doesn't rock. It leans a hair. The cab takes the weight like a little shrug. That's what it did. A slow, polite acceptance of a passenger who hadn't opened the door. The belt didn't move this time. The cold didn't punch. It was almost worse that way. The normalcy made my mouth go dry. I didn't say anything. I didn't breathe loud. The whisper wasn't a whisper now. It was a presence that had learned a different trick. I felt it searching not through the cab but through my attention. The way you reach in a drawer you've opened 100 times and know exactly where the spoon should be. It wanted me to look at the speedometer. I was at 26. I had crept without noticing. I eased to 24. The presence didn't leave. It held there like someone watching over your shoulder while you crack a safe. I reached for the dial on the radio, for something human to anchor my brain, and that's when something soft brushed the back of my right hand. It was the lightest touch, like the paper tag on new gloves. Except I wasn't wearing new gloves. I flinched. The truck drifted. I corrected. I told myself I'd felt my own jacket cuff move. The presence didn't care what story I told myself. It stayed. We neared the far bank. The willow markers thickened, and you could see the cut for the ramp like an incision. The presence leaned away, not out the window this time, but back into whatever space it had come from. It moved the way fog moves when a truck passes, just peeled off and folded around itself. The passenger seat grew its full shape again. The cab warmed. I hit the shoulder past the ramp and didn't bother keeping the engine on while I put my head in my hands. Denise keyed her mic. "Everybody clear?" she asked. We all said yes, one after the other, like people stepping off a ferry and counting. We didn't talk about it that night. We talked around it. We talked tires and weather and how Mary's coffee could strip paint. Mac pretended nothing had happened. He pushed the next load and we took it, because that's what we do. You want an ending you can put a flag in? I don't have it. The weeks after, Nothing dramatic. The lights didn't come back. I didn't see the belt move again, but the truck smelled faintly like ozone on cold mornings, and once, parked behind a pump shack in the sun, I found a handprint in the inside frost of the passenger window. It was small. That doesn't mean anything. Frost makes things look smaller. That's what I told myself as I wiped it away. A month later, during a run on the road to a different village, we heard about a driver who'd gone through upriver. Not one of ours. Not a friend. A name somebody knew a cousin of. He'd been too heavy, they said, and too fast. He'd been in a hurry, and the river had decided it was done with hurrying. They found his truck in a clamp of ice when the thaw came. That happens. It's not a ghost story. It's a statistical certainty. I still think about the presence in my cab touching my hand when my speedometer read 26. Last summer, when the world was all mud and mosquitoes and those towns got their supplies on barges instead of ice, I took a side job hauling steel down in the lower 48. I crossed a bridge over a warm river that smelled like creosote and weeds. It had been months. I had laughed at myself out loud twice by then. I had told nobody but Cal. I had almost convinced myself that the lights were just an aurora trick on a tired brain, and that static talks like anything if you need it to badly enough. Halfway across that bridge, the radio hissed with a single tiny spark. Just once, the kind of hiss you can blame on a loose jack or a rig rolling the other direction. I looked at my passenger seat. It was empty. Of course it was. The belt lay flat. The heater was on low. My phone played a baseball game that made the cab feel like home. I looked down at my speed. I was doing 66 in a 55. I let off. I didn't brake. I let off the throttle and I said, okay, to nobody and to something. My hands went steady. The radio cleared. I still talk to Mac once in a while. He pretends not to remember that night. Denise does remember. If you push her, she'll say, do not stop on the river, like it's the only moral that matters. Cal will smoke in the doorway and grin like you're trying to start a fight you'll regret, and then he'll quietly tell you to keep it under 25 on the ice no matter what your trailer weighs. If you press him on the lights, he'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you. They're not there for you, and they're not there for you. They're just there, and sometimes they let you go. Here's what I think, and I can't prove a word. I think there's weight up there that isn't measured by a scale. I think the river is not just ice and water and current. I think it remembers, and I think it wants to keep its cautions moving along. You can call that superstition or physics in a coat you can't see. All I know is when the night falls that clean and the dome turns hard and the aurora curls in a tight little snake above you, something walks beside your cab. If you ever run that road and you feel the radio go warm and dry and unhelpful, and if you see a smear of white-blue that doesn't cast and doesn't blink, don't panic. Don't stomp. Don't act like a deer about to bolt into its own ending. Keep your hands quiet. Keep your speed under 25. Don't stop unless you're on land. If something sits in your passenger seat and breathes without fogging the glass, understand that it's not a threat. It's a rule. It's the river telling you the things your instructor already did, but quieter and closer. Listen. Get across. Thank whatever you need to thank. When you get to the other side, you can wipe the frost and laugh and count your fingers. You can tell yourself it was nothing. You can tell your crew it was everything. Or you can do what most of us do. Put your head down, take the next run, eat the muffin, and let the big, cold silence of that place hold your secrets the way it holds everything else. If you were in my cab that night, you'd believe me. I still sleep with a bungee hooked to the passenger door latch. Habit, that's all. But sometimes, when the radio snows at me in a clear sky, I look at that seat and I think I see the belt ease out half an inch. I check my speed without moving my hands. Every time, the needle is where it should be. Every time I whisper thanks to a thing I hope to never meet again and know I probably will. I didn't tell anyone for months. When I finally tried, the words came out thin and wrong, like they'd been left in the cold too long. People wanted it to be wolves or weather or us being idiots because those are human problems with human solutions. What happened to us in the Brooks Range wasn't wolves and it wasn't the weather. And if it was a person, then it was the kind of person that doesn't leave tracks in fresh snow. My name's Nate. I've known Tyler since we were 12. We met in shop class and stayed friends through the usual junk. Graduations, breakups, jobs that didn't go anywhere. We went in on a freezer together and saved for trips we couldn't quite afford. Alaska had been the joke for years. We'd send each other videos of the caribou migration like two kids staring at a candy store window, promising that next season we'd go north. Last fall, we decided we were done with promising. We flew into Fairbanks, then up to Coldfoot, where there's a truck stop and a little bar with antlers over the door and a fish mounted at a stupid angle. I remember the waitress asking if we wanted extra napkins for the burgers, and Tyler said, "We'll need napkins for our napkins." And she laughed, and that was the last normal conversation I had. We hired a bush pilot named Gus who flew an old white and red Super Cub with duct tape on the seat and a Jesus Fish decal on the dash. He told us he'd drop us near a spruce line on a little gravel bar one valley over from the Dalton Highway, far enough to be quiet, close enough for him to pick us up on schedule. "You boys know your weather?" he asked while we loaded our packs. He had a beard that looked like someone had shaken powdered sugar into it. "Yeah," Tyler said. "We're hoping it holds." Gus squinted at a gray smear of cloud over the mountains. "Hoping ain't a plan," he said. "Firewood is a plan. A shovel is a plan. The inReach is a plan. Use the check-in every evening. If I don't hear from you and the wind comes down, I'm not flying. You understand?" We understood. We took off hugging the river, the land turning from dark timber to open brown and white, the mountains rising like knees out of the earth. He set us down on a rough strip of gravel with a little ribbon of creek at the edge and a stand of stunted spruce 200 yards to the west. Tree line here meant the last few trees before the slope turns truly empty. "I'll be back in 5 days," Gus said, killing the engine. "You boys make it 6 if you've got meat, I won't cry. But don't go walking on me. I'm not coming to find you in the clouds." He helped us pull the gear out. Tent, stove, little blue cooler for hearts and tenderloins if we got lucky. He shook our hands and took off in a burst of wind, the plane a red toy against the white of the ridges. The sudden quiet was a physical thing. The only sounds were the faint click of the creek and Tyler's zipper. We set camp near a pile of river rock and a snag that looked like a bent finger. We made a meat pole with paracord between 2 poles and hung our food high. It was late afternoon, light like a white plate set on the world. There were caribou tracks everywhere, a dotted language moving in lines and circles. We shouldered rifles and climbed the low ridge to glass the basin, and by evening we'd seen a small band moving north. We made a plan for morning, ate ramen from the pot, and crawled into the tent with our boots inside to keep the cold from turning them into wood. The first night wasn't eerie. It was beautiful. We heard wolves far off, a thin sound like wire singing. The aurora came and went like someone breathing. I slept in bursts because sleeping on hard ground is something you forget you need to relearn every year. We went after the caribou at first light. The sky was squint blue. There was a dusting of new snow, maybe an inch, soft as ash. Fresh powder is a hunter's friend. You can see how the world moves. We cut the band off on a saddle and Tyler made a clean shot. If you've never been in that moment with someone you love, the animal down quickly, the air full of the metallic smell of blood and the plain. Honest work of taking care of the meat. It's one of the few times life feels simple in the best way. We took quarters and backstraps and left the ribs for last because they flare and cool faster. We carried the first load down like pack mules, slipping and laughing, and hung the meat under the spruce to keep it shaded. We made a little pile of the remaining bones for later. The plan was to go back up for the last stuff, then take a day to rest the legs and glass again. That was when we saw him. Or it. I don't have a word that doesn't make me feel stupid typing it. It was at the edge of the spruce line, about 150 yards away, where the trees begin to thin. A slender human figure in something dark, standing still watching. No blaze orange, no hat, just a shape. You know how people look miles away and your brain does the math for you? It was like that. My mind filled in guy, in boots, in dark clothes. I raised my hand in a hey, and Tyler lifted his chin, but the figure didn't move. "Hey," Tyler called. "You good?" "Nothing." The wind slid down the valley. The figure didn't turn or shift. "Maybe he's glassing," I said, though he wasn't holding binoculars. "Maybe," Tyler said. "Hey, you need anything?" I tried again, feeling weirdly embarrassed, like we were bothering a stranger on a bus. The figure moved then, not walked exactly. It stepped sideways into the trees like a person backing into a doorway and was gone. We stood there for a second, listening to our own breathing and the tiny clicks of ice forming at the creek. We looked at each other. "Probably doesn't want company," Tyler said. "Maybe he can't hear us," I said. "Wind's funny." "Yeah," he grinned. "We ain't here to make friends. We went back up for the last load. We kept glancing to the tree line. No more figure. When we came back down by a different route, I swung wide on purpose and walked the edge of the trees. I wanted to see where he'd stood. The snow was pristine. Caribou tracks crossed our path. Our own boot prints were easy to follow. At the place I thought he'd been, there was nothing. Not old prints covered by new snow. Not ice-crusted indentations, nothing. "Ty," I said, and he came over. He frowned down at the ground, then up at the trees. "Weird," he said finally. "Could have been a shadow. Or he was 20 yards deeper than we thought." "Yeah. Or he was on some hard patch and the snow just didn't take the print," he said. And it sounded reasonable out of his mouth. He kicked at the earth and a little melon slice of crust lifted and broke. We told ourselves it was nothing. We hung the rest of the meat and made tea. The wind picked up, dragging long scarves of cloud down off the ridges. By dark it had started to snow, the kind of snow that comes down diagonally and stacks strangely on spruce needles. We zipped the tent and listened to it rasp. Sometime in the night I woke up to whistling. Not an animal. A thin human whistle. A two-note thing like a kid calling a dog, tee-doo, tee-doo, except there was no pattern. It came and went, close, then far, then close again, as if someone were pacing the edge of camp. Tyler stirred and whispered, "You hear that?" Yeah, we lay very still. The whistling stopped. The wind pressed one side of the tent and released it. I thought about the man-shaped dark at the trees and told myself it was the wind playing on something. A fissure in the ice, a spruce limb making a flute out of itself. I slept again in little slices. Morning was white. Our nylon shell had a thin frozen crust we shook off. I stepped out and took in a breath that hurt. The meat pole had a rime of frost on the cord. Someone had twisted the tag ends into a neat little braid. "Did you do this?" I asked. Tyler was tying his boots. "Do what?" I held the braided ends. "This." He stared for a second, then shrugged and smiled too big. "Guess I did." "I don't know, man. We were goofing with the rope yesterday." "You sure?" "Yeah, probably. Who else is going to do it?" He looked past me, into the trees, then back. "We should move the meat. Hang it a little farther out. Units this close to tree line." He trailed off. He didn't have to say the rest. Bears, wolves, people. We moved it 30 yards and made a louder camp that day than we needed to. We clanged the pot and talked too much and let the stove burn in the afternoon. We checked in on the inReach and got back a little green check mark. The wind came and went. No whistling. By sunset the sky went bone clear and the cold went from annoying to disciplined. We sat in our parkas and watched the aurora organize itself into green curtains and ripple like it had a breath of its own. For a while we forgot to be spooked and were just two idiots with numb fingers saying wow over and over. The third morning we decided to still hunt the fingers of spruce farther up. There was sign and the sunlight looked like a promise. Half an hour into the trees we found a single bootlace. It was dark blue, not either of ours. It lay coiled on the snow like a snake, perfectly placed, not dropped, not dragged. Tyler put his heel on it and leaned down to pick it up. "Don't," I said. "I don't know why." It sounded dumb. He laughed. "What, you think it's cursed?" "I think somebody dropped it on purpose." "We can leave it," he said, but he tucked it into his pocket anyway, like he didn't want to waste it. We hunted a few hours and saw nothing but a raven that moved with us, ripping the quiet with its voice. Around midday, a cough came from the tree line. Not a person's cough. Not quite. Something trying the shape of a sound. I froze, my finger invisible on cold metal. Tyler turned slowly. He mouthed, "Did you hear?" "Yeah," I mouthed back. We went back to camp in the afternoon to find the meat pole empty. The rope hung in loose loops. The ground beneath it was clean. No scattered snow, no drag marks, no prints. We followed the rope with our eyes to the trees and saw nothing but white and green. The meat didn't just vanish. It had to go somewhere. A bear would have left gouges and a smell even in that cold. Wolves would have left a map in the snow. We spread out and made circles. The only tracks we found were our own. "Someone took it," Tyler said, and for the first time his voice had no bravado. "Someone carried 100 pounds of bagged quarters and left a magic carpet behind?" I said, trying to keep it light and failing. He dug in his pocket and took out the bootlace and stared at it like it could answer. He tied it around his wrist without speaking. We didn't have the luxury of a full panic. Meat gone meant extra days weren't happening unless we wanted to chew leather. We had food, but not tons. We decided to move camp out onto the gravel bar, away from the trees. We hauled the tent and the stove and every piece of gear. In the late light, the spruce edge looked like teeth. I was coiling a guy line when Tyler said quietly, "He's back." I looked up and there it was again. The figure, closer this time, maybe 100 yards, silhouetted against the green-black of the trees. Tall, thin. I could see the notch where a neck should have been. The shape did not step forward or back. It just existed the way a hillside exists. I raised my rifle and shouted, "Hey, we don't want trouble. You took our meat." Tyler, God love him, tried to make a joke. "We'll trade coffee for backstraps." The figure didn't tip its head. It didn't wave. It simply edged backward, smooth as if the ground were a sheet of ice and it had no friction, and the trees took it. We ran to where it had stood. Nothing, no prints. The snow was a new page. That night the whistling came back. It wasn't everywhere this time. It was on one side of the valley, then the other, then against the tent itself, so close that the nylon trembled with breath. I fumbled with the zipper and Tyler grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't give it a face." We sat up in our sleeping bags with our boots on. The whistle stopped and a voice said, "Nate," low and careful, like a new reader sounding it out. Then with slightly more confidence, "Nay, yet Ty." It wasn't quite us. The pitches were wrong, the spacing wrong, an alien reading as a human. "Leave," Tyler said, his voice shaking. "We don't want trouble." Silence. The long, hollow kind. Then a tap on the tent pole, deliberate. Tap, tap. Tyler chambered around without asking. The metallic snick was loud in the world. The tapping stopped. We didn't sleep. By dawn, the cold had painted the inside of the tent white with our breath. On the fourth day, we agreed to break the rule and move closer to the river, even if it made pickup harder. The open felt safer. We tried to keep the banter. We failed. Tyler retied the bootlace, then checked and rechecked the knot like it mattered. Around noon, while we were shifting camp again because fear makes you do dumb work twice, we heard something like a man laughing a long way off. It came from the spruce in the rhythm of a laugh. Ha, ha, ha. But there was no joy in it, no air. It sounded like someone imitating a laugh with no lungs. "I'm done," Tyler said. He's never said that. "Let's call Gus, early pickup." "We don't have clouds," I said, thinking that would make me feel in charge of something. "He'll come tomorrow morning." We hit the SOS emergency, but not emergency, the need extraction, not bleeding to death pre-written message. A few minutes later, the inReach vibrated. "Affirm," the tiny screen said, and then, "Weather moving in, early morning best window. Be on strip ready." Okay, we thought. We had our finish line. The wind rose in the afternoon in little fists. We went for water at the creek with our rifles slung, and I felt watched the way you feel weight on your back in a dream. When we came up the bank, we saw our own tent 30 yards ahead, and my stomach did an inside-out thing. The tent door was open. We hadn't left it that way. Inside, the sleeping bags were neatly rolled. My knife lay on my bag, blade open, pointed north, as if somebody had set it down after making sure it was sharp. Tyler's spare gloves were tucked into his boots, thumbs poking out like little hands. "Okay," he said, "not okay." He laughed, and it broke in the middle. "Okay." We dragged the tent into the open and staked it to the gravel so hard my palms stung. Tyler said he was going to take a leak and stepped away behind the little shelf of willows, and I called after him to keep his rifle on his shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "I heard him whistling once, our old two-note 'Hey, where you at' whistle from tracking deer in Appalachia years ago. T-do." For a second it was so normal it stung. Then the whistle came back from two places at once. Tyler somewhere near the willows, and the same notes from the spruce lower, not quite the same. Teet-do, teet-do. The one from the trees kept going after Tyler stopped like a record skipping. "Ty," I shouted, and stepped to where I could see him. He was standing there in the shallow cut, turned toward the spruce line. He lifted his rifle without shouldering it and said, "Hey, stop screwing around." "Back up," I whispered. I didn't know if I was warning him or begging him. The laughing, not laughing sound came again, louder. Tyler fired a warning shot, a clean pop of sound that cracked the cold. The smell of powder rolled over me. The trees ate the echo. We waited for running or a shout or anything human to happen. Nothing did. Tyler lowered the rifle halfway like a man who's suddenly embarrassed. Then, as he took 2 steps forward, his boot hit a patch of ice and he slipped in a controlled little lurch. He threw his hand out. The bootlace around his wrist snapped and fluttered to the ground. He didn't go down. He laughed at himself once, real laugh this time, and looked back at me, grinning, cheeks pink, eyes tired. I grinned back, relief sharp and stupid. A shape moved at the tree line to his left, smooth and vertical, and my grin died mid-air. "Ty," I said, and my voice cracked. He turned his head. For a second, his profile was clear and ordinary and mine to keep forever. Then he wasn't there. Not the horror movie way. Not ripped away, not sucked under. He took a step toward the trees like he'd seen something he recognized: mom, dog, dollar bill. And that step didn't happen on snow the way steps do. It was like someone paused the world and cut the frame, and in the next frame he was 3 feet deeper and not making any marks. "Ty," I screamed. I ran the 6 steps to the cut bank, boots spray-kicking powder, and slid where he had slid. I got my feet under me and charged into the spruce, because that is what you do when your friend walks toward the impossible. The air under those trees tasted like a freezer that's been closed too long. I went where Tyler went. And there were no tracks. I yelled until my throat lit on fire. I aimed my rifle and didn't shoot because there was nothing to hit. The shape I'd seen was gone or was never there, and the only things in front of me were trunks and shadow and a strip of gray sky. I told myself he'd gone around a stump and I'd find him peeing and laughing about how freaked I looked. I told myself this until my voice ran out. When I went back to the gravel, the bootlace lay there like a dead worm. His rifle lay on its side with the safety off. I did the only thing the body understands. I got small, as if shrinking would make me harder to catch. I crawled into the tent and zipped it and put my back against Tyler's rolled bag, because I couldn't touch anything of his and also couldn't not touch it. I held the inReach like it was holy and sent a message to Gus. "Come now." The little typing dots didn't come. The little typing dots mean someone is with you across the air. The dots weren't there. I sat there with the rifle across my knees, and the world got dark around the edges. The whistling started again as the first stars came out. Teep-doo, teep-doo. It circled the tent, first slow, then quick, then slow again, as if someone or something were studying how long it took that sound to make me jerk. A hand dragged slickly over the outside of the tent. Slow from ground to peak. Not the way a man drags a hand, but the way a cold animal might test a thing it doesn't eat. When it reached the top, something tapped the pole twice, tap, tap. At some point I slept. You shouldn't be able to sleep in hell, but you can. I dreamed of a person with no face tying ropes into bows with frozen fingers. I woke to the sound of a plane. Gus put the Super Cub down at first light like he'd thrown it. He looked small and carved from the same white as the ridge. I ran for him and waved, and he did not shut off the engine right away, which tells you something about men who fly up there. He looked at the camp, then at me. It must have looked bad. He cut the engine, and the sudden quiet made my ears ring, and he said, "Where's to?" "He went into the trees," I said. The words sounded tiny in that big place. He went into the trees, and he didn't leave tracks. Gus stared at me like he was taking a measurement. "Get in," he said finally, and his voice was careful. "We'll radio it." The takeoff was a long prayer. Back in Coldfoot, there were troopers with their quiet calm and their questions. We flew back with them. They landed where Gus had landed. Now they put on snowshoes and made grids. They looked for overflow in the creek, for sign of a collapse, for prints. They found nothing except our own paths. One trooper who'd done too many recoveries put a hand on my shoulder and told me exposure can make you see things. I told him I'd seen the absence of things, which is different. He didn't write that down. They asked about fights. We hadn't argued about anything more serious than salt versus no salt on tenderloin. They asked about alcohol. We had none. They asked if he'd been unhappy or impulsive. He'd sent his wife a selfie the day before, pointing at the aurora like a dumb tourist, grinning so hard his forehead wrinkled. They called it an accident, because what else do you call it? They said he likely fell into a hole along the creek and got swept under. That sometimes overflow forges weird paths beneath the crust. I wanted to be a person who grabbed that explanation like a rope and never let go, but it hadn't been the creek. I knew with the same certainty you know your own name that the creek wasn't where he had gone. When I got my pack back from evidence, something rattled in the top pocket. It was the bootlace. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember a lot of things about those hours. I sat in the corner of the truck stop with coffee I didn't drink and made a bow with the lace and undid it, and made it again until my fingers felt like wood. Outside, a lady bought a tourist hoodie that said Arctic, and the world continued being a place where things usually leave tracks. Back home, I didn't answer calls. I had dreams of the tent breathing, the nylon moving in and out like lungs, and a voice outside working at my name with patient mispronunciation. On a rational day, you can build a decent wall out of facts. There are people up there who don't want to be found. There are weird currents beneath the snow. Our minds misfire in white emptiness. Then a night comes when the wind in your backyard whistles just wrong and you remember laying awake in nylon, and you know every wall you've put up is made of sugar and will fall when the weather shifts. In the months since, I've gone over details like a man picking gravel from a wound. This is what I have that feels like it matters. We were not far enough north for it to be anything but spruce and shadow. The snow was new and honest. Caribou marked it with the blunt truth of hooves. We made prints. The figure didn't. The meat moved without marks. The voices outside were almost right, and that was the worst part. Not monsters, not howls. Something that had watched people long enough to think it could pass. And this. When Gus took off that last morning, when the plane rose and the world fell away, I looked down because part of me wanted the comfort of distance to see the trees as just trees. The light was flat and kind. For a second, the shadow of the plane slid over the spruce edge and something dark stood ahead above the line, still as a fence post. I thought it was a trick of perspective or a burned trunk, until it shifted its shoulders in a human way and stepped back so smoothly no shadow changed around it. Later, I told myself I'd imagined it because the mind is a traitor around grief. But I know this. When Gus banked, just before the wing cut my view, the shadow of that knot tree didn't move with the shadows of the trees. It stayed where it was, black as a fresh hole. I don't have a moral for this. I'm not posting to scare anyone into buying gear or to say don't ever go north. Gus would tell you to bring a shovel and a plan and to respect the weather, and he'd be right. The trooper would tell you to stay off the creek when it's weird, and he'd be right. All I have to add is small and useless. If you hunt the Brooks Range and you see a man-shaped dark at tree line that doesn't wave back, and if the snow is telling you the truth about every living thing except that one, leave. Don't listen for the whistle. Don't stand there trying to decide what's real. Real is what's under your boots and what your breath does in the cold. Tyler's wife still messages me sometimes. Do you remember what socks he wore the day you flew out? Did he say anything about his dad's truck? Those are the kinds of questions that come when there's no body. She wants a story that has edges she can hold. I give her the ones I can. I tell her he was happy. I tell her he laughed at his own jokes. I tell her he tied a dumb blue lace around his wrist like he was 13. I don't tell her about the voice at the tent, because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is keep your monsters to yourself. Last week, on a morning that had the same kind of flat light, I went for a walk along the river where I live. It snowed 2 inches the night before. People with dogs had already been out. I like looking at the prints, the dainty, perfect ovals of a fox, the messy joy of a lab. There was a line of human prints following the path and then veering off toward a stand of birch. I followed them because some part of me can't help investigating tracks now. The prints went to the birch line and stopped at the edge where the wind had drifted the snow like a lip. On the other side, the snow was smooth and new. My skin went cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was probably nothing. The person probably stepped on crust and then onto the plowed section where it didn't take. That's the story I chose because I needed to get to work, and because sanity is sometimes nothing more than choosing the story that keeps you moving. I stood there a long minute anyway, listening to a wind that wasn't making any music, and finally walked back to my car. As I pulled the door shut, a kid somewhere down the trail whistled for his dog, Tidu, and my hands jumped on the wheel. If you go north, carry more wood than you think you'll need. Be ready to leave meat behind if it means leaving early. Don't bring something home just because you found it in the snow, even a stupid lace. And if a figure stands where the trees begin and watches without waving, don't answer when it says your name wrong. Don't teach it how to say it better. Some things don't want to be found, and some things have figured out how to find you anyway. I work nights at the small hospital in Nome. If you've never been up here, picture a handful of lit windows on the edge of the Bering Sea, surrounded by snow that never quite looks clean because the wind keeps dragging grit across it. When the wind is up, it sounds like someone whispering through their teeth. When it's quiet, it's too quiet. The hospital sits a couple blocks off Front Street, not far from the Iditarod finish line arch. We've got an ER that can handle most things, a few rooms for inpatient, a little L&D, and a morgue that's really a walk-in freezer with 3 drawers. People think night shift is chaos. Sometimes it is. Mostly it's paperwork and quiet and you making deals with yourself to stay awake. If I finish charting this, I can have another cup of coffee. If I do another round, I can sit down for 5 minutes. I moved up from Anchorage after a divorce and told myself I'd stick it out for a year. 3 months in, I stopped pretending I slept well during the day and just accepted that I'd gotten good at staring at ceilings. This was in late January, deep winter. The first night I heard the knocking. The thermometer outside the staff entrance said -21. You always feel it in your teeth first, like they're trying to ring. I was covering the floor with Leah, a CNA who's lived here her whole life, and Cal, the night security guy who keeps a thermos full of coffee that smells like a campfire. Dr. Shu had the ER. We had one inpatient, a guy named Parker with a bad heart, and the rest was quiet. Around 2 in the morning, the air gets so still it feels like everyone's breathing in sync. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Down the hall and below my feet, our morgue is in the basement near laundry. The sound came up through the floor like someone rapping under a table. I paused, pen in the air, and Leah looked up from her crossword. You hear that? I asked. Hear what? She cocked her head. 3 more, patient and steady, like whoever was knocking knew they had time. Leah set her pencil down. Pipes, she said. They bang when it's this cold. Pipes don't count, I said, but I didn't say it like a joke. Cal popped his head around the corner. You two summoned me or what? Pipes, Leah told him. Cal made a face. Nah, not tonight. We went downstairs anyway, because you always go downstairs when you tell yourself it's nothing. The basement in this place has that damp cement smell that never leaves your clothes. Laundry on the left, maintenance on the right, and the morgue tucked at the end behind a heavy door with a code pad. The cooler hums like a giant refrigerator, because it is a giant refrigerator. And when you open it, the air has this dead clean smell of disinfectant and cold metal. Inside were 3 drawers stacked like bunks. We keep logs of what's in which, when they went in, when they came out. That night, only drawer 3 had an occupant, an older fisherman named Eddie who'd gone under at the mouth of the river during a warm spell and been found when it froze again. He'd been in there 2 days. We were waiting on weather for the medevac to Anchorage and then the funeral home. I checked the seals. Cal bounced his knuckles once against the cooler door. It made a hollow sound that didn't match what I'd heard upstairs. We stood there a minute listening to that mechanical hum and feeling stupid. Nothing knocked back. Cal shrugged. Leah said, "Pipes," again, and we went up. At 2:17 it came again. I know the time because I looked at the wall clock and thought, how is it only 2:17? 3 knocks, even as a metronome. The sound wasn't loud. It's what I'd call confident. Like when a patient hits the call button and you know before you check the board, it's someone who wants their blanket tucked, not someone in crisis. This time Cal headed back with me without me asking. I punched in the code, opened the heavy door, and cold hit our faces in a white wave. The hum, the frost breath. Drawer 3 closed. The metal was so cold it looked blue. Probably the defrost cycle, Cal said. Does that knock? I said. He rubbed his jaw. Only when it wants attention. We stood there breathing steam while the sound did not repeat. I know I should have been satisfied. If you work in hospitals, you get used to buildings talking to you. Alarms, vents, ice machines, bed rails clacking, all of it becomes background. But I kept thinking of those 3 neat taps punching up through linoleum and rubber soles. I made a note in the log when we went back upstairs. 2:17 knocks, pipes? Checked cooler, okay. Writing it down made it smaller. On the second night, at 2:17 again, the knocking came in a set of 3, then a pause, then 3 more. Like someone spelling something very basic and very patient. I am here. I made Cal come down again. We opened the cooler and a drift of frost blew off the door, singing against the hinges. Drawer 3 was closed. Eddie's toe tag swung a little from the draft we'd made. I swear I could hear the faintest tick-tick as it tapped the drawer front, but that's probably in my head. I reached out and touched the tag out of habit, the way you check a pulse even when you know you shouldn't. My glove stuck to it for a second and I peeled it off with a soft ripping sound. That night, for the first time, I saw the marks on the inside of the cooler door, 3 long vertical streaks where the frost had melted and refrozen in thin, clear lines. They looked like what it would look like if someone ran 3 fingers down a fogged bathroom mirror. Cal saw them too. He reached out as if to lay his hand over them, stopped, and dropped his arm. Glove marks, he said. His voice wanted me to agree. Whose? I said. He didn't answer. Neither of us touched the streaks. We didn't have a morgue tech. Evan, the guy who covers days, was home sleeping, but I left him a note. When I came back the next night, his reply was taped under my note. Frost drips, happens. Under that, in Cal's sharp block letters, someone had written, pipes. If that had been all, I would have forgotten it. A lot of creepy things happen in hospitals, and most of them are boring. But once I noticed the pattern, I started hearing it everywhere. The elevator dinged 3 times when no one had called it. The coffee machine coughed in 3 little spurts instead of one long hiss. A bed alarm went off in an empty room. 3 savage beeps and then nothing. I tried to joke with Leah about it. She didn't smile. She said, "My grandma used to say not to answer 3 knocks after midnight. It means it's not a person you're answering." Who told her that? She told me her father told her. If you open the door, you invite it in. I guess that's a thing in a lot of places. Who do you think is knocking? I asked, smiling because I wanted her to roll her eyes. She didn't smile back. People we didn't keep. On the 4th night, Mr. Parker died. He'd been a gold prospector when he was younger, then a janitor at the school. The kind of guy who still wears his hat when someone's trying to put an oxygen mask on him. No code. His daughters held his hands and prayed out loud. His heart got messy on the monitor and then decided to be nothing. I went through the motions. Time of death 2:13, I wrote it down. I still feel pity, even when it doesn't surprise me. I took a breath in the supply room. When I came out, the wall clock read 2:16. The second hand moved past the 12 and clicked to 2:17. 3 knocks rolled up through the floor like a reminder. I put my hand on the rail for a second and felt my own pulse jumping in my palm. Later, when Mr. Parker was bagged and tagged, and the daughters had gone home to sit with the worst of it, Cal and I took the gurney downstairs. It's a weird intimacy, the way the dead become so heavy. We slid him into drawer 1 because it was the lowest, and my shoulder had started to ache in a way I didn't admit to anyone. Drawer 3 remained closed. As we turned to leave, something ticked behind the door. Not the hum, something more like a fingernail against metal. 3 times Cal said nope, and was out the door first. I laughed because it felt like the safest thing to do and followed him. If this story stopped there, I'd chalk it up to winter and lack of sleep. But 2 nights later, a drifted-in man they'd pulled off the edge of Front Street came in. He was a seasonal worker most of us knew by sight, always wearing a blue beanie. Exposure. He went into drawer 2 because 1 and 3 were already occupied. Evan, the day guy, made a note about the door sticking a little when he'd opened the cooler that morning and filed a maintenance request. Check latch, it said. Scratches inside door cleaned. That caught at me, scratches. I asked him and he shrugged. Like someone scraped ice off the door with a key, he said. We've been in and out a lot. It's nothing. At 2:17 that night, the knock started again. I went down alone because I'd told myself I was being dramatic, and I didn't want to give the thing more power by asking for a buddy. The cooler door hung a little off true. When I pulled it open, the rubber seal peeled from the frame, making a soft kiss sound. The 3 streaks on the inside of the door were clearer now, with little runs at the ends where melted frost had frozen again like teardrops. Okay, I said into the cold. It fogged in front of me. You've got our attention. Nothing answered. The hum filled the room like someone holding one long breath. I put my hand on the front of drawer 3 without thinking. Cold lanced up my arm. The metal was so hard and still it felt alive in the way ice sometimes feels alive, like it's making decisions you're not part of. I'm embarrassed to write this next part. I bent and pressed my ear against the front of the drawer the way you'd lay your ear against a door if you were listening for a prisoner. Nothing. No shuffling. No plea. Just the sound of the compressor chugging like a heartbeat too slow. I pulled back. 3 knocks trembled through the door under my palm. Not in the room. Inside the drawer, I jerked my hand away and almost slipped. I remember that flailing feeling. The skid of my shoe, the little grunt I made. My breath fogged, hung, and faded. My gloves squeaked and my wrist hurt where the cold had gotten in. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the steam to stop in front of my mouth and for me to tell myself 5 different reasons it was a trick. Contracting metal, air pockets, me putting my hand on it hard enough to make it ping after. 5 reasons that didn't hold. Back upstairs, Leah looked at me and said, "You saw something." I heard it, I said. "Tell Cal," she said. "He likes being needed, so I did." He made a show of not loving it and then went down anyway. He came back 5 minutes later and didn't say anything. He sat, poured coffee, and looked at the rim of his cup as if whatever was down there might float up through the dark liquid to look back at him. When he finally spoke, he said, "They're just metal boxes," and then, after a beat, "But I'd rather not go in alone again if it's all the same." The storm hit 2 nights after that. You could feel it building all day. A heaviness in the air, the way the snow stopped squeaking and started to feel greasy under your boots. I tried to nap and got 20 minutes of blackout sleep and woke up with a start like I'd been dropped. By 9 p.m., the big front door was gusting snow inside when it opened, and the ER filled with people who'd come in early to avoid being stranded. By midnight, the road to the airport might as well have been the surface of the moon. We lost mains power at 1:46. The generator kicked in with a shudder that went through my feet and up my spine. Emergency lights came on patient red. Shu swore. Maintenance ran, grabbing their hats. The hall alarms blinked like slow, panicked eyes as everything recalibrated. The cooler, I'd learn later, didn't come back online right away. It warmed fast. The morgue starts to matter to you in these moments. The bodies are families' stories waiting to happen. You don't want to be the person who let someone thaw and make that grief worse. Shu sent me down to check temps and get ready to move if we had to. Cal went with me because the maintenance guys were trying to coax the generator into doing what generators do without burning the place down. Leah needed to stay with Parker's empty room because his daughters were coming back to sit with him one last time, before the funeral home when the weather cleared. In the basement, our breath made big white clouds. The emergency lights made everything look like we were underwater. The cooler's digital readout should have said Tudegsi. It said Pulse Wundegsi and ticking up. The hum was offbeat, huffy, like it was doing a job it didn't like. "Go get the transport chest," I told Cal. "We keep a small backup cooler on wheels for exactly this. It would handle 1, maybe 2 bodies if we had to move them." He jogged off. I cracked the cooler door and cold slapped me. The air inside didn't feel like it belonged in the same room with me. Drawer 1, 2, 3. 3 closed fronts in a column, each with a little rectangular label holder and a stainless bar. A film of melted frost slicked the floor. I pulled drawer 1. Heavy but workable. I slid Mr. Parker out carefully and turned him a little to check the bag seal. My radio hissed. 3 quick bursts of static, gone. "Say again?" I said nothing back but my own breath. The radio clicked 3 times and went dead. I worked mechanically because if I let myself unravel, I wouldn't be much use to anyone. I slid Parker to the transport chest as Cal wheeled it in, and I pivoted, got leverage, used my knees. We nestled him inside the smaller cooler as gently as we could and shut the lid. 2 more, we'd need a second chest. We didn't have one. Cal stared at the temp on the wall. "Pargus now." He chewed his lip. The wind above us was doing something strange in the vents. A low whooping sound that didn't sound like physics so much as a breath someone was taking on purpose. "We have to do 1 more. Minimum," I said. 2 more, he said. I put my hands on drawer 2. It stuck. When it slid, it did it all at once, a jerk that almost sent me backward. The blue beanie guy lay there bagged, frost crystals webbing the crease of the plastic. I pulled him out a little and hesitated because my shoulders shrieked, and because my radio crackled again and I wanted it to speak like a person so I could feel less alone. The radio didn't. Somewhere behind me something knocked. 3 times. It didn't come from the hallway. It didn't come from the vents. It came from behind the 3rd drawer, inside the metal. "Do not," Cal said softly. "Open that one. Help me with this," I said, because I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard it. We got the second body to the chest. I tucked his tag in carefully because dignity is the only thing you can't give back if you take it away. Then I made the mistake of turning my head toward drawer 3 and listening. I knew the stories Leah had told. Grandmas and rules you keep because you don't want to be the person who finds out they were true. But it didn't feel like fairy tales. It felt like a practical decision. Is there or is there not someone in distress? 3 knocks. Steady. Patient. I put my hand on the bar of drawer 3. It was colder than the other 2 had been, or my hand had gotten warmer, or both. I told myself I was checking the latch. I told myself I was doing my job. Underneath those, I was telling myself that if there was a 1% chance, and I ignored it, I'd never sleep again. "Don't," Cal said again. "Give me a reason not to," I said, and I didn't mean to sound angry, but it came out that way. He looked like he was going to say, "Because I'm scared," and didn't. I pulled the handle. The runners made a noise like metal screaming at itself. The drawer came out 2 inches and stopped. I pulled again. It slid out with a skittering give like it had been holding on to something. The body bag inside was zipped up to the neck, and there was a rim of dull frost around the zipper like a thin line of sugar. "The tag clipped to the end," said Eddie. The plastic was opaque white. The bag twitched. It wasn't a dramatic convulsion. It was a small, shivering tremor, the way a sheet moves when someone underneath breathes and you're not quite sure you saw it. 3 knocks came from somewhere: door, wall, air, and stacked themselves neatly in the space between my ribs and my spine. "Okay," I said, and I wasn't sure who I was talking to. "I'm opening it a little." "No," Cal said. "Do you want to live with it if there's someone in here?" He closed his eyes and then opened them. "I want you to live with you," he said. I bent and pinched the zipper between my gloved fingers and tugged it down 2 inches. The sound it made was small and loud at the same time. Cold lay in that bag like it belonged there more than we did. The mouth inside was slack. The lips were crusted with frost. The eyes were closed. It was Eddie the fisherman with the same soft, creased face I'd seen when we admitted him. Only still. I watched the notch where his throat met his collarbone. Nothing. I didn't know what I wanted to see. Breath. A heartbeat under frozen skin. Proof I could act in a way that changed something. There was nothing. Something knocked behind me. Not in the bag, not in the room. From the other side of the cooler door, 3 steady taps, like someone who knew they had time. I zipped the bag back to where it had been and slid the drawer in, and because my hands were shaking too hard for finesse, slammed it shut. The cooler door blew itself closed with a suction thump that bumped my shoulder and made me think for one hot second that I was about to be locked inside. I grabbed the handle hard in my throat and yanked. It stuck. For one more second that stretched so far it cracked. I saw my own breath bouncing off the inside window and thought, this is how it happens to people. And we tell ourselves later it was their fault because they did a dumb thing in a dumb place and we need to believe we wouldn't. The latch thumped and gave. The door opened. I stumbled backward into the hallway and almost went down in the slick. Cal caught my elbow like I weighed nothing. The emergency lights pulsed once, twice, 3 times and held. We got the second body into the transport chest and wheeled it up the ramp. The wind howled outside like it was trying out vowels. Upstairs, Shu had lanterns set up like a camping trip and was suturing a kid's eyebrow while talking his mom through deep breathing. Leah had Mr. Parker's daughters in a room with a pot of coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since August. You know what kills me about nights like that? Life just keeps happening right through the middle of whatever you're carrying around in your chest. Maintenance had the generator purring by 3. The cooler temp dropped back into the safe zone. I wrote in the log, 146 power to gen, 210 rising temps moved 2. I didn't write any of the rest. I didn't know how you'd phrase it in a way that didn't sound like a story you told in the parking lot, because you wanted attention. The next day, I slept badly and dreamed about surface ice breaking under my feet in a clean line that matched the hospital tiles. When I came in that night, Evan had left a maintenance order hanging from the cooler door. Replace latch, it said. Scratches inside door reappeared. Cal had added in smaller writing. Maybe not pipes. I tried not to turn everything into a symbol. I tried to be a grown-up with a mortgage and a grocery list and a job. I lasted until 2:17 when someone knocked 3 times on the locked door to the unit. I was at the desk. I looked at Leah, she looked at me. We let the second and third sets of knocks happen without moving, because there was a no admittance after midnight sign right there, and we weren't going to answer the door to whoever had decided 2:17 was the new social hour. When we finally went and checked the camera, it showed exactly what you don't want to see when you're trying to be rational. Nothing at the door at 2:17, but a shiver in the picture, a glitch like heat haze. The camera timestamp glitched 3 seconds forward and then back. I can give you one piece of something that isn't just how it felt to me. I can't post pictures here, but I have them. The inside of the cooler door had 3 parallel frost-bare streaks the length of my forearm. They didn't line up with the pattern of the shelves. They didn't match gloved fingers. They were too long, too straight, too deliberate. Maintenance replaced the latch the next afternoon. The work order I photocopied says, old latch showed interior scoring, pattern of 3 vertical gouges, no interior tools present. A week later, when the weather cleared, the bodies flew out. The rumor was a guy at the funeral home in Anchorage made a comment about how the plastic had stuck to one of the bags in 3 narrow strips when he unzipped it. I didn't confirm it. There are some calls you don't make if you want to function. Everything quieted after that. In the way things in winter here stop making energetic decisions and go back to being heavy. The knocks didn't come every night. They came sometimes, and then they came somewhere else in the building, as if they were trying to see if we'd answer a different door. My radio developed a habit of clicking 3 times before it actually carried a voice. Twice I answered a bed alarm that didn't exist. Once at home around 10 in the morning when my apartment was shadow dark because of the heavy curtains I'd hung to fake night. Someone knocked on my door. 3 polite. I stood in socks on my ugly kitchen linoleum and didn't move. After the 3rd set of 3, my upstairs neighbor's toddler laughed. I still didn't open it. I switched to more day shifts in February. No one said why out loud. The administrator who makes the schedule got a look in his eye that said he'd been told a story and was trying to decide whether believing it made him an idiot or a functioning member of a team. Cal started bringing an extra thermos and pouring me a cup without asking. Leah told me I looked like someone who'd seen a wolf in the parking lot and then pretended she hadn't because she didn't want to spook anyone. Dr. Sue pretended not to notice when I took an extra beat. Before I punched in the morgue code. Here's the last thing. You can write it off if you want. Last week, the wind had a different edge to it. The turn toward spring that doesn't mean warmth, just a new kind of cold. I was on a day swing, doing meds and listening to a church group sing in the family room because someone's uncle was fading. The building felt busy in a human way, not in a mechanical way. At 2:17 p.m., someone knocked on the door of room 5 where no one was. 3 times. It was loud enough that Parker's daughter looked up from her coffee. "You expecting someone?" she asked. "No," I said, and tried to turn that into a smile. I opened the door because it was daylight and people were watching and the rules felt different. The room was empty. The bed was made in a square that would have made a drill sergeant cry. When I stepped in, the heating vent rattled the way it always does. I went to the window to check the latch because the cold leaks in when it's not tight. On the inside of the glass, 3 long, clear streaks ran down through the fog a patient had left there with their breath earlier, recent enough not to have evaporated. 3 neat lines close together. They looked like someone had dragged 3 fingers down on the inside, asking for someone to notice. I wiped them away with my sleeve because I didn't want to give them more life than they already had. I still have the photocopy of the work order in my locker. I keep telling myself I'm going to throw it away because it's turning into a talisman, and talismans are for people who don't trust their own eyes. It says what it says. Replace latch. Interior scoring, 3 vertical gouges. I don't need it to remember. I wake up at 2:17 more nights than I admit to anyone. If someone knocks then, I listen. I don't answer. I don't know if that's brave or cowardly. I know it feels like the only rule I have. When you work around dying, you build small rituals. You tuck hands under blankets. You smooth a sheet one last time. You make a note in a log so the next person has something to hold on to. Leah's grandma's rule is stuck in my head now like a song you can't shake. Don't answer 3 knocks after midnight. In Nome, when the wind is up and the hospital breathes and the sea tries to talk through the vents, it's not hard to imagine who's knocking. If you ever find yourself standing in that basement with frost blooming in your eyelashes and a drawer shivering under your hand, here's my advice from someone who has stood there and done the math she didn't want to do. You can open the door, but you will bring something in with you, and you won't know it until it follows you home and gets good at finding you around 2:17. You will start to think the building knows your name. You will look at every set of 3 as an answer to a question you didn't ask. Last night I sat at my kitchen table and wrote this. The heat clicked on. Somewhere upstairs a chair scraped. My phone lay face down because I hate seeing the time. I heard it anyway. 3 soft knocks on my door. I paused. The silence afterward had shape to it, like the space your hand leaves when you press it into snow and pull it out. I didn't move. The knocks came again, patient like someone who knows they have time. My eyes flicked to the microwave clock because I needed to make it ordinary. It said 2:17. I didn't open the door. I don't think I ever will. I waited and the sound went away. The way frost goes away from a warm surface and leaves 3 long streaks behind to remind you where it had been. I sat still for a long time after, until the part of my body that makes decisions caught up with the part that keeps you alive. People ask me if Nome feels haunted. I tell them all places feel haunted if you stay up late enough. If you're ever in our hospital and you hear it, 3 even knocks, a pause, 3 more, tell yourself it's pipes if that helps you keep moving. But if you go downstairs and put your hand on the 3rd drawer and feel it answer you, Don't say I didn't warn you. We keep a logbook in the morgue. It's got my handwriting in it on a page in January, where the ink shakes a little and the letters run together. If you look close, you'll see I crossed something out. I wrote, "Don't open," and then I scratched it into a scribble, because rules only work when other people believe you. I didn't open it again. That's my whole proof. That, and a photocopy in my locker, and the way the hair on my arms lifts like it's got ears when the clock says 2:17. If someone knocks then, you'll want to be the kind of person who chooses their future over their curiosity. I'm trying to be that person. I'm trying very hard. I grew up in Fairbanks, and if you've lived there through a few winters, you know the sounds ice makes. You know the hollow drum booms that roll across a lake when the temperature drops fast. You know the tiny ticking from trapped bubbles and the rifle shot cracks that make everyone freeze for a second, even though no one actually falls in. I thought I knew those sounds. I thought I knew the rules too. Check thickness, avoid inlets and outlets, carry a rope. That night I learned there's another sound. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. 3 dull knocks from directly under your feet, like somebody rapping their knuckles on a table you're standing on. It was late January, fully dark by 5. The forecast said -15 and steady. No wind. That's good skating weather for Fairbanks. Your breath hangs solid, your eyelashes collect crystals, and the sky sometimes throws you the green curtains of the aurora if you're lucky. We were bored juniors with a beat-up hockey set and a group chat called Pond Champs. Me, Cole, loud, fast, always the one who wanted to race the truck. Jess, the practical one with a rescue course patch on her backpack. And Darren, quiet, stronger than he looked. A couple other kids said they'd meet us later with thermoses of cocoa and a Bluetooth speaker. We didn't go to the official rink or chain of lakes where the parks guys post thickness. We picked a little kettle lake a few miles off Badger, the one behind the spruce grove where in summer mosquitoes make a cloud over the cattails. In winter it turns into a perfect dark plate, and if you catch it after a week without snow, the ice goes black and glassy. You can look down and see milky strings of bubbles and white cracks like veins frozen deep inside. It feels like flying. We parked on the side of the plowed road and walked in along a snow machine track. The sky was awash of stars, Orion slanting above the trees, breath pluming out like little ghosts. Cole had the hockey stick over his shoulder like a flag and kept doing commentary in a fake sportscaster voice. Live from Fairbanks, Alaska, the Pond Champs take the ice. Will Jess rack up a hat trick? Will Sam finally learn how to stop without crashing into the snowbank? You know how to stop, Jess said. You just prefer the wall. I carried the milk crate with the puck and a coil of rope we'd thrown in just because Jess said to. Darren clanked along behind us, blades looped over his shoulder. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing. When we reached the shore, the lake looked like a sheet of obsidian. No snow on it except for a dusting near the far end where wind had pushed a fine white crust against a pressure ridge. You could see right into the ice, the trapped bubbles and the long, shadowy cracks that weren't really cracks, just stress lines. It was beautiful in a way you don't get if you've only seen the world through a screen. God, look at that, Jess said, stopping short. I love black ice. Cole had his skates on before the rest of us unlaced our boots. He launched off on sock feet, blades scraping the snow at the lip. Then he was out on the lake, going fast, shoulders low, throwing off the first high clear scrape that echoes and makes every animal in the woods go quiet for a second. Wait, Jess called. We check thickness. It's mid-January, Cole yelled back. It's like 20 below at night. We're fine, Jess shrugged at me. We still check near the mouth. Outlets over there by those cattails. Don't go near the cattails. We did the slap and listen thing with the hockey stick and the toe of a skate, scraped a test circle, peered at the edge. The ice where we planned to play had to be 6 inches at least, probably 8. The light from my headlamp made it glow deep blue in the first inch and then go black. Good enough. We laced up, pushed off. The lake sang around us. We set 2 gloves for goalposts and started shuffling through a sloppy warm-up. My nose burned. My toes went from numb to alive so fast they hurt. And I grinned without meaning to because that's what skating on good ice does. You get light. When I turned, I could see my friends silhouetted in the aurora beginning low on the horizon like someone had run a green highlighter along the treetops. The first odd thing was small. I heard a hollow knock under me, 1, 2, 3, slow, spaced out, just enough to make my brain flick attention downward. I stopped. The ice under my headlamp looked like it always does. A dim map of fractures, little white comets of trapped bubbles. I rapped back with the butt of my stick because I'm an idiot and because it didn't occur to me yet to be afraid. Sam, don't do that. Jess skated over, breath streaming, cheeks red. Sound travels through ice super far. You'll spook the guys at the next lake. Pretty sure the next lake doesn't care. She knelt and pointed her light down. See those lines? Those could be fractures from thermal contraction. It's dropping. The ice is tightening. It makes noise. It sounds like it's coming from right here, but it could be half a mile away. And the 3 knocks? She shrugged. Coincidence. Your brain loves patterns. We went back to playing. Cole feathered the puck like he was on TV. Darren never said much, but when he did, he had the funniest one-liners, and he did slow loops around our rink, warming up. A pickup truck passed way out on the road, tires whispering on packed snow, its taillights red beads drifting through the trees. The aurora pulled higher and thinned out into moving bands. The air was so cold that if you inhaled fast, your throat stung. The second odd thing wasn't the sound so much as the feeling, like a change in pressure. I was chasing the puck and passed over a patch that looked darker than the rest, a kind of oval bruise beneath the surface. The ice made a deep, unhappy sound. Boom! And my whole body punched out goosebumps. That happens on cold nights. But when I looked down, something about the darkness under me moved. Not quick, not even obviously, just a sense that a shadow shifted, like a fish rolling in a pond. I told myself it was a trapped air bubble or the headlamp reflection. I kept skating. Center ice, Cole shouted. Bring it, Wallstop. He cut past me, blade edges gripping and hissing, and for a second his headlamp beam slid across the black oval I'd just crossed. It looked like a window to me, the way clear lake ice can look like a window if you get rushes of cold air in the right sequence when it's freezing. A window looking down into something deep. Jess called, "Stay away from the mouth. See the cattails? Currents underneath." "Copy," Cole said. And then, because he was Cole, he veered toward the cattails anyway, still talking, wanting show-off speed. "I grew up here, Jess. I'm not an idiot." "Then don't skate near moving water." He threw a wide circle and came very near the crescent of cattails rimed with hoarfrost. The ice looked slightly different there, whiter, more opaque. He knew the difference. We all did. You stay off the white stuff near inlets. But it was only for a second, a little flirt with danger to make a point. 3 knocks came from under him. 1, 2, 3. Even Cole's body language changed when he heard it. His shoulders bunched and he looked down. The ice under his skates spidered with a thin white starburst. "Back off," Jess said, sharp now. "Cole, get back." He started to push away. There was a sound like a bottle cap popping. The white star expanded and his right leg punched through the surface. People always describe it like the ice breaks. But when you're standing there, it doesn't sound like something breaking. It's wetter and hollower, like a throat opened. Cole dropped to a knee and tried to throw himself forward, and his other leg shot in two, and then he was up to his waist and the hole widened and he went under to his ribcage. "Rope," Jess snapped. She already had it in her hands. She went down flat on her stomach because that's what you do. Spread your weight, and shove the end of the hockey stick out like a lance. "Grab!" Cole didn't grab. He flailed and gulped and made a strangled sound that didn't sound like his voice. His beanie bobbed once and was gone. I went down the way Jess did, plastered my chest to the ice and wriggled forward, and my face was right above the hole, and I saw something I wished I hadn't. Cole wasn't just treading and slipping on slush. He was jerking down in a rhythm, like his legs were being pulled. His eyes were wide and glassy and white around the edges, and when his mouth cleared, he said, "It's holding me, it's got me, get me out." "Get it off," in a voice I'd never heard from him. "Give me your hand," Jess ordered. She was calm, almost calm enough to make me calm. "Cole, hand, now." He clutched for the stick. His glove scraped the tape and slid. I shoved forward just far enough to hook my arm around his shoulders and felt the bite of the cold like knives through my jacket. Darren grabbed my ankles. When Jess yelled, "Pull," he did, and I hauled back with everything I had, and Cole came up half a foot, and then, this is the part where people roll their eyes when I tell it, he jerked down again when there was nothing to hold him down. It looked exactly like someone below had both hands around his calves, and decided to give one more mean tug. "Pull," Jess yelled again. Darren grunted and turned his face away like he couldn't watch, and we dragged. Cole cleared the lip and collapsed on the ice, chest heaving. He made this sound, Not a sob, but a weird hiccuping cry, and he kicked like he was still underwater, lashing out at nothing. "My legs," he said. "My legs, get it off me." There was nothing on him. His jeans, steaming already in the air, clung dark to his shins. Jess and I rolled him the way you do, and cut his laces with the knife on her keychain and ripped the skates off because wet laces turn into wire when it's cold. His socks were already turning into slush bricks. We wrapped his legs in my jacket and Darren's sweatshirt and dragged him away from the hole. Then we dragged all of us farther, because I swear I heard the 3 knocks again right next to us, like whatever had been below was moving with us under the ice. "Truck," Jess said. Now, he'd been in the water maybe 20 seconds. In that temperature, it was enough. His skin from the knee down looked like raw fish, and he couldn't quite get his breath right. We got him back to the truck and cranked the heat and called 911 like we should have done the second we saw him sink. The dispatcher's voice was steady and kind and asked questions like, "Is he conscious? Is he shivering? And do you see blue or white skin?" We did all the hold the armpits against the vent stuff. Cole shook and cursed and then went quiet, jaw muscles jumping, eyes fixed on nothing. His lips were pale as dry ice. "What grabbed you?" I asked, because my brain wasn't letting go of the sentence he'd said. It had hooked there like a burr. He swallowed. It took him 2 tries to answer. "Hands, it felt like hands." I don't..." He stopped and breathed. "Fingers. Around my ankles. I couldn't kick." Jess looked at me over his head with a face that said, "Cut it out. Not now. Do not feed him the story he's already telling himself." "Under ice current," she said out loud. "There's a mouth of a creek right there. Sometimes just a little flow moves under the top layer. You get eddies and weird suction and it feels like a grab. Okay, it wasn't hands. It was water." "There was something," Cole whispered. His eyes glistened in the dashlight. "It pulled." Paramedics met us at the intersection by the coffee shack. Cole refused the ambulance, classic Cole, but they checked him over and made us take him to urgent care anyway. By the time the doctor saw him, his ankles were ringed with deep red marks. The doctor nodded like, of course, pressure striping from his skates and socks and the ice edge. That explanation fit if you squinted, and I tried to make it fit. It didn't look like a straight ring to me. It looked like 5 oval bruises on one side and 5 on the other. The spacing wrong for a cuff. I went home late, hands still smelling like that swampy metal breath lakes have when you drill into them. Wet iron and old leaves. My mom yelled first and hugged me second when she heard. "What did I always say about inlets?" she asked, and I didn't have an answer worth saying out loud. You'd think that would be the end. Lesson learned, don't skate near moving water. But none of us could stop thinking about what Cole said. Jess kept sending links to articles about ice physics and frazzle ice, and how pressure waves can move under clear ice like ghosts. She wanted to be the adult in the room, and I was grateful for it. But I also knew she didn't come out of that night clean. Twice she texted me, "Did you hear it too?" And I knew she meant the 3 knocks. Darren didn't text much at all. He brought over a cheap 6-pack, and we sat in his parents' garage in camping chairs with the space heater on, not talking, and he said finally, "It felt wrong. Like the lake knew we were there." The next afternoon I realized I'd left my phone out there. I'd taken it out to film Cole doing a dumb sprint start and stuffed it in the pocket of the milk crate with the pucks. And in the rush after he fell, we'd abandoned the crate. Jess volunteered to come with me because that's who she is. Darren said he had to help his dad, which I think was true and also not the only reason. Cole texted, "No" 3 times and then "Don't go." We went. The day was that blue, clean cold that makes everything too sharp. The head-high spruces around the lake were furred with hoarfrost. No wind. A raven croaked somewhere, the sound so deep it felt like a metal pole being struck. We brought the rope again, and this time Jess brought a spud bar, an iron pole sharpened at one end. We did it by the book, tapping the ice hard in front of us, listening, staying well away from the cattails and the opaque strip near the mouth. The ice boomed a couple times, the big whale sounds that make your stomach jump and then settle. The sun licked the tops of the trees and then sank like it always does in January, barely bothering to get up. Our hockey gloves were still there, the makeshift goal. The milk crate had frozen to the surface overnight, but not badly. I chipped at it with the spud bar while Jess scanned the surface around us and kept up a steady report like a climbing partner. "Edge looks good here. 4 inches of clarity. That white stuff 20 feet out is junk. Don't go near it." "Your phone's not in the crate?" "No," I said, feeling around in the pocket where I remembered shoving it. Just brittle tape and a puck stuck in a little disc of ice like a fossil in amber. I must have dropped it. Where? Over. I pointed toward the first dark oval I'd crossed the night before. I didn't want to say it, so I said, somewhere over there. We went slow, tapping, and when we got within 10 feet of the area, I remembered. Jess stopped. Look, under the clear ice, something lay like a leaf. Not a leaf, an outline, a glove, one of Cole's. There was a tiny air lens around it from where it had been trapped before the top froze back over. It was face up, palm open. That's what it looked like to me anyway. A hand under glass. How? I started. He dropped a glove, Jess said, too fast. It got slushed in. That's all. Why is it under the ice? I asked. The hole was over there. I pointed toward the cattails. The glove lay at least 15 feet from the mouth. Water moved it and the surface skimmed. Happens, don't get closer. That's thinner ice. See the feather pattern? She used the spud bar to tap in front of us. The sound there was different. A little more live, more ringing. She marked a limit with the end of the rope and pulled the coil off her shoulder. No slack wasted. From here we used the hook. I wedged the spud under the glove like a lever and tried to slide it toward us. It resisted like weak magnetism. I put more weight into it. It slid an inch and then stopped. There was no current. The glove didn't snag on anything visible. It just didn't want to move, Sam, Jess said quietly. Stop, I stopped. We both listened. The lake made a low sound from somewhere far off, a gentle seismic moan. Then close, right under where the glove lay, 1, 2, 3. 3 knocks. They weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They sounded like knuckles on wood. Thermal, Jess said, voice thin. Contraction. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because the knocks felt like a hello and my brain wanted to be polite. I rapped the spud bar once on the surface, light. Tap. We waited. Nothing. We started breathing again. Then from beneath my feet, delayed like an echo, 3 answering taps closer. I felt them in my bones more than heard them, more a pressure than a sound. 1, 2, 3, Jess flinched. Okay, we're done. My phone, we're done. She bent to lift the rope, and when she bent the beam from her headlamp, which she still had on even though the sun was trying to make a go of it, swept across the ice in front of us. Lit up under there, right by the glove, was a shape the size of a hand. 5 pale ovals like bleached stones pressed against the underside of the ice, splayed like a starfish, and then my brain had to reshape what it was seeing because the 5 ovals were under Jess's feet too, trailing her. Another hand shape just behind, and another. Don't move, she said, though she didn't need to say it because I was frozen in the human sense, not the temperature sense. The spud bar clicked in my grip where my glove had little ice beads on it. Sam, Jess said, and now her voice had the precise steadiness of someone holding panic off with 2 hands. We are going to step back, 1 step at a time, toward the snow machine track. You do not jump. You keep your weight spread. You look at me. Ready? Yep, I said. My voice squeaked. We took 1 step. The 5 ovals under her feet didn't move. The ovals under mine did, smearing like something pressed and skimmed and then gathered again. I tried to see it as trapped bubbles moving under the surface tension. I tried. The palm shape near the glove shifted. The little air lens around the glove made a shimmering wobble like a heat mirage, and I swear, in that wobble, just for a second, I saw a face. It was probably my own reflected face with the headlamp distorting it, and the black water turning my eyes silver. I know that. I tell myself that. But at the time, all I knew was a long, pale oval and darker ovals where eyes should be and a mouth open as if to breathe. We took another step. The ice moaned. The glove skated an inch by itself and stopped, palm still up. A slow stream of tiny bubbles rose from under the glove and made a zipper noise as they slipped along the underside of the surface. The 3 knocks came again, but not in the same place. This time they were to our left, as if whoever was under there had slid on its back and knocked somewhere else. 1 step. Another. The cattails were far away now, 30 feet, 40. I knew, absolutely knew with cold certainty, that the ice here had held a truck a dozen winters. It would hold us, but that's not what my body believed. My body believed that if I looked down, the ice would be a membrane and a face would push through like a fish's snout in a pond in April. Keep going, Jess said. Please. We reached the edge in the little rise of snow, and it felt like stepping off a stage. My knees went out from under me. Jess didn't sit. She kept walking until we were on packed snow under the spruce where it didn't feel like a second skin, separated you from something dark and deep. Only then did she let the rope drop. Only then did she breathe out loud in a sound that rattled. We didn't run. Running felt like it would be disrespectful, like it might make whatever we'd walked away from follow faster. We walked back to the truck, breath tearing in our throats, trying not to look back even when the lake boomed again, deep as a whale's call. We got in and Jess slammed the door too hard. The sound was way too normal. Physics, she said, and hit the steering wheel with her palm. It's physics. Trapped methane, frazzle ice layers, pressure waves. It's everything you can read about. It's not. Hands, I said. She put her face in her mittens and said muffled, "Don't say it." We told ourselves a story and we stuck to it. We told Cole a carefully edited version. Glove under the ice, weird noises, nobody fell in, we were smart, we left. Cole didn't sleep much for a while. Every time I saw him in the hall, he had that same jarred look, like he'd been shaken and set down a little crooked. He started taking the bus home instead of driving, and once I watched him hesitate before stepping on the rubber well at the school's front door, like he was imagining it giving way. 2 weeks later, Mr. Baird from 2 doors down cornered me when I was shoveling and told me about his uncle's under-ice whitefish netting in the 70s. He used words like lead line and anchor stake and runway, and showed me how they used to cut 2 holes and pass a pole under the ice, using a stick with a nail in it to catch their line. "Scares the daylights out of you if you're not expecting it," he said cheerfully. "That thing's skittering under there. Feels like something alive." He winked at me. "We like to tell stories. That's what keeps kids from being stupid." I nodded and shoveled and tried to let that explanation settle my brain. Maybe someone had set a line out there and we'd seen the tail of it drifting under thin skim. Maybe the glove had slid along that line. Maybe the knocks were a fisherman tapping his pole in the next cove over, sound traveling funny. Maybe. I think Mr. Baird wanted to help. I also think he knew we were skating out behind the spruce and wanted to put a bit of old man folklore between us and it. February rolled into March. The daylight came back long. The roads glistened. The aurora softened. The temperature swung and the ice on every roof made that thaw-refreeze crust that looks like dragon scales. I convinced myself I was fine. Then one night I woke up and heard tiny tap, tap, tap under my bed. It was probably the baseboard contracting. That's what I told myself as my whole body went cold and I lifted my blanket and looked at the floorboards. I said out loud, "It's the house," and felt ridiculous, and also like if I didn't say out loud it was the house, something else would be true. The first big thaw came in April. Everyone posts photos when the Tanana goes. People drive down to the river to watch the ice go out, the slabs like broken plates banging and turning in brown water. The lake behind the spruce does a smaller version, black water seeping up through rotten honeycomb ice, edges going first. On a Saturday, I walked there by myself like an idiot because I wanted to see it turn back into a lake, not a mirror with something under it. The cattails rattled in a breeze that smelled like old grass. Near the spot where we'd seen the glove, there was open water with a fringe of rotten ice that clinked together like wet glass flakes. Something bumped the shore, a ridiculous little clumsy sound. I picked my way out on the hump of frozen snow and leaned down and fished it out with a stick. It was Cole's other glove. It was swollen and pale and weirdly smooth from months under. And when I squeezed it, black water ran out and something else slid into my palm. A small clump of translucent stuff like shredded onions, except hard. It took me a second to realize they were little crescents of ice. Not ice, nails. 5 little curved slivers, smooth on one side, ridged on the other. The ridges like you'd see if you looked close at your own fingernails. The rational part of my brain said they were bits of cattail stalk, frozen and worn down. I placed them on my open palm where they looked like pieces of the moon. I put the glove back. I put the crescents on top of the glove and watched them melt into the sun glitter and disappear. I told myself I'd found cattail shreds. I made myself walk away. Summer was fine. Summer always is. We forget easily when the mosquitoes are singing and the daylight never ends. We camped, we worked. Cole got louder again and pretended not to flinch when someone dropped something heavy. Jess got a summer job and wore a whistle on a lanyard and rolled her eyes at me when I teased her about it. But the whistle stayed around her neck even when she was off shift. The part that won't leave me alone didn't happen until the next winter. First week of December. Fresh, cold snap. The kind that makes the air so dry your knuckles crack and your jacket zippers stick. The first real freeze-over of the little lake. My mom sent me out to start the truck. And while it idled, I walked down the trail out of habit, breathing steam, enjoying that early winter hush when everything's reset. and the snow hides all the junk from last year. When the trees opened on the shore, the lake lay there like it had been poured a minute ago, clear as glass. You could see every bubble stack, every trapped twig, the frozen white scribbles of the first fox that had dared a crossing. I stood with my hands in my pockets and something stupid in my chest that felt like forgiveness. I'd thought I wouldn't ever want to be near this place again. And here I was, drawn like we always are to places that scared us because we want to prove to ourselves we won't be again. I didn't step onto it. I'm not that dumb anymore. I just watched the light crawl across the surface as the sun, such as it was, tried to exist. The ice made a sound. The old deep moan. I smiled because that sound is part of home to me. Then very close, as if the sound had curved under the ice and come up near the toes of my boots, I heard 3 knocks. 1, 2, 3. Light, polite. I didn't move for a full minute. My breath slowed. My heart didn't. The knocks came again farther out. Then again near the cattails. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a bird pecking at something. It was inside the ice. I don't know what it wants. That's the worst thing. The part that itches behind your eyes when you try to sleep. If it was trying to pull Cole under to drown him, it didn't. If it wanted to chase us away forever, it failed. Here I was, watching. It knocked like someone asking to be let in. It knocked like it was answering a pattern we'd started and didn't understand. I backed away without turning my back because I couldn't make myself do that. On the way home, I cut across the empty lot behind the coffee shack and kicked at a frozen puddle. The thin ice there cracked like glass, and my boots sank an inch and stopped, my toes cold and safe. Under that translucent film, just before my footprint clouded the whole sheet, 5 pale ovals bloomed and drifted away from the pressure, the exact size of a hand. I stood there until my toes hurt and the coffee shack girl knocked on the window to see if I was okay. I keep telling myself it's physics. I keep telling myself about bubbles and stresses and currents we can't see. I rehearse the words so I can hand them to other people when they ask and sound like someone who learned a lesson and is now an adult. It helps, it does. It gets me through starting my truck and walking down to get the mail in the dark and the weeks when you don't see the sun. Because you're in school when it rises, and it sets before you leave, but on nights when the temperature falls fast and the house resettles and the old baseboards talk to themselves, I lie awake and listen. Sometimes if I hold my breath, I hear it. A soft, deliberate rhythm from the cold side of the window, from the street outside, from the slab of a lake a mile away under its wind-polished glass. 1, 2, 3. The polite rapping continues as if it knows I'm there, as if it remembers, as if it wants me to come back and put my ear to the ice and tap my answer, and feel, for a fraction of a second, something tapping back. I'll start simple. My name's Nate. I took a night shift job up near Prudhoe Bay because the money was good and my marriage was bad. Nights are honest. They don't give you much to think about except the next mile, the next checklist, the next breath through a frozen balaclava. I figured I could do 21 days on, 20 off, stack some savings, keep my head down. That was January. The sun barely peeks over the horizon up there then. Blue twilight for hours. Floodlights that make the snow look like ground glass and the pipeline running south like a metal spine. They tell you on day 1, the line is always a little warm, the air is always a little trying to kill you, and if you see a polar bear, the truck is your best friend. You don't get fancy with the rules. You clip in, you log your miles, you go home. We were a small crew assigned to night patrol on the service roads. Me, an old hand named Vic, a mechanic called Raj, and Danny, kid from Oklahoma who couldn't stop smiling even when frost built on his eyelashes. There was also Sloan from security, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else but never missed a thing, and Elena, the medic, who slid hot coffee to anyone she thought had seen too much. A lot of background faces at the man camp too. Kitchen guys, welders, a foreman called Henderson who loved paperwork like it was a warm fire. For 3 weeks, they're your entire world. The first time I saw the walker, I was on mile 9 west of Pump Station 1. The pipeline sat up on those vertical supports, fin radiators sticking out like silver ribs. It was a clear night and the aurora was thin and pale green, barely there, like someone was draping gauze across the sky and changing their mind. The truck heater was fighting a losing battle with the cold, and my radio fizzed every time I went under a line of floodlights. I'd stopped to log a seep of frost at a support footing. Nothing, really. Just the kind of ice feathering you get when wind does tricks. I scribbled, stamped my boots, and that's when I saw a man out by the pipe, maybe 30 yards off the road. He was waving, both hands over his head like he was at an airport trying to guide me in. I felt the jolt of adrenaline you get when a safety drill turns real. I pulled the truck out of the ruts and nosed toward him, tires chattering on the cold. I hit the light bar. He was in a parka, hood up, no face I could make out, just a dark oval, still waving. I unbuckled, grabbed my radio, and stepped out into that styrofoam quiet you only get below zero. My breath hung like cotton. "You all right?" I shouted through a balaclava that turned my words into damp heat. He stopped waving. He didn't run. He didn't move. I took maybe 10 steps, careful on the sugared snow, eyes flicking to the pipeline because you keep a healthy respect for the machine that holds millions of barrels of something hot and unforgiving. "Hey," I tried again. And then, forgive how fast this happens because it felt slower then, my radio cracked with Sloan asking for a location check. I said, "Mile 9. And when I looked back to him, he wasn't there. Just like that, I thought, okay, whiteout trick. You lost him in the dark. Maybe he ducked behind a support. I walked to where he'd been, my headlamp slicing clean cones of light into the snow. The only tracks were mine, crisp and blue in the shadows. I pressed on until I stood where he'd stood and realized what I was looking at. Boot prints. Not mine. A straight line of them coming in from the open tundra, heels clean, tread clear. They walked right up to the pipeline and they ended at the pipe itself. No turnaround. No scuff like he'd leapt up or doubled back. They just ended. Toes jammed against steel like someone had walked face first into it and kept going. I'm not an idiot. I know snow can drift. Wind can cover tracks. The pipeline radiates a little heat and can make weird ice halos. I'm telling you what I saw. A line of prints that hit the pipe and vanished. I felt small all at once, like the sky kicked me out of it, and I swore because it kept me human. I keyed the radio. "Sloan, be advised, possible stranded pedestrian at 9 West, I got weird sign. Request a second unit. Copy, Nate, you need assistance?" Her voice was so calm it put a thin skin over my nerves. "Negative for now," I said. "Might be a prank." "Leave it and return to the road if anything feels off," she said. And I heard in the word anything the whole file of liability and the memory of someone who didn't come back once. "We'll review cameras." Back at the truck, I angled us so the dash cam could see the support, and I sat with the engine idling and my pulse in my hands. I stayed until my skin started to sting in that early way it does before the deep cold finds tendons. Then I did what you do. I logged the anomaly, I drove on. I told Vic at the warm-up trailer. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said, like he'd been waiting for it, "Yeah, you saw him." "Who?" "The walker," he said. "Don't worry. You're not special. Everyone sees him once if they stick around long enough." He told me the story they always tell. Some welder in the 70s fell from a catwalk during a whiteout, never found. Or a hand who took off his gloves and touched the pipe and stuck. And by the time anyone found him, he'd gone to sleep and never woke. The details change. The ending never does. "He waves you in so you leave your truck," Vic said, stirring powdered cream into coffee. "Don't. It's hard country out here. The dark uses your own manners against you." I laughed because what else do you do? He didn't laugh back. The next week got stranger in a slow, stacking way. We had a cold snap deep enough to make metal ping, followed by a day where the temperature rose just enough to put a glaze on everything. Radios picked up static even in clear weather. Danny complained that his shadow looked wrong, longer than it should be, even under the floodlights. Raj teased him. "Shadows grow in the cold, man. Everyone knows that." But I watched Danny leave a trailer and his shadow turn a corner a breath before he did. And I wasn't quick to add a joke. 2 nights after mile 9, Sloan asked me and Vic to double back near block valve 3 because the differential pressure sensors had spit out a weird reading. "Probably nothing," she said. "If it's ice on the line, we'll catch it. Be cautious. Somebody dumped bearscat on the road between 7 and 8. I drove. Vic watched the sky, liked to point out a faint corona or a sundog even at night. The way light does what it wants this far north. "I saw him my first winter," he said after a while, not looking at me. He was close. I could hear his parka friction in the cold. He waved. I waved back. I thought I saw the ice from his breath, but it was steam from the line. I remember thinking that. "The steam moves like an animal. You followed?" "No," he said. I did something worse. I whistled. "Why's that worse?" "You invite things with a whistle. You don't know that yet because your house was close to a grocery store." He popped a cough drop and the heater fan clicked, and the windshield ticked with ice. We found the valve, logged the pressure, which had normalized, and saw our own faces bent in the baptized steel. I spun us around and started back east, and that's when the radio played my voice talking about something I hadn't said yet. Copy. Heading back east, it said in my cadence, with my stupid way of saying east like east. I hadn't keyed my mic. I looked at it. Vic looked at me. Then I keyed up because apparently I like improvising with fear. Security, say again last transmission? We heard the click of their open channel. The hush of 1,000 miles. Nate, we didn't hail you, Sloan said. What did you hear? Me, I said. I heard me, static. Then too much silence. Return to camp, she said. Now. When you're tired, your brain folds things into shapes it can carry. Back at the man camp, I told myself we'd picked up some old chatter on a loop. Maybe we bounced off a long wire. Maybe we caught a bleed from a pump house recording. Danny teased me for hearing my own voice. Maybe you're haunted by your habit of talking to yourself, he said. Elena slid me that coffee. The kind with a skin of powdered creamer that leaves lines on your lips, and touched my wrist and asked if I was sleeping. I said yes. It wasn't a lie. I slept hard and blind and woke like I'd been pulled up with a hook. A day later, the pigging crew sent a scraper, a pig, down the line to knock out waxy buildup. You can hear them sometimes if you put your ear near a support and the world is quiet. A dull traveling knock, like someone's knocking to come in and never finding the door. No one is allowed to put their ear against the pipe, obviously. It's hot and unforgiving. But if you stand downwind, you can hear it talk to itself. We stood outside the launcher and watched steam with headlamps. Raj smoked a menthol even though he was quitting. He offered Danny one, and Danny said no, then yes, then laughed at himself for being 23 and scared of stories. The pig went in with a push and a rattle, and the line took it like it had swallowed something it didn't want to. You hear that? Vic said. There were 3 knocks. A pause. 3 again. The kind of rhythm you pick up if your brain has ever memorized a door. Sloane's radio flared. I got motion, she said, flat, like she was reading a weather report she didn't trust. East of 8, on the north side. Nate, Vic, are you nearby? We were. We drove slow. Lights spread wide. A white world tilting in the windshield while the aurora gathered its skirts and thought about being bright. Something moved out on the tundra. Not close, not far, in the way movement lives in your peripheral vision. I stopped and cut the engine. The hum of the line filled everything, the world's longest throat clearing. A man stood by the pipe and waved. Same posture, same sawed-off shoulders under a heavy parka, 30 yards, maybe less. Vic whispered, "Don't answer." He waved harder. I raised a hand to show I'd seen him because I'm weak in that way. I respond when people ask for help. The figure lowered his hands and held one out to the pipe like it was a friend he wanted to introduce me to. The wind carried a voice that could have been a voice, a murmur. A syllable that might have been my name or might have been the language cold speaks to nerve endings. I put on my gloves. I clicked my harness to the truck line because that's what you do in ground storms, and because I wanted something to tell me I wouldn't forget my edges. Vic did the same. We go 10 paces, he said. We stop. We don't touch steel. Copy, I said, and hated myself for talking like a radio. We went 10 paces. We stopped. We shined our headlamps and saw the prints again, coming in from nowhere and meeting the pipe like they were meant to. I counted 3 knocks in the line and realized that the air moved in a way that made the skin under my eyes want to pull back from my skull. I don't know how else to say it. There are moments when the world changes density, and you feel like a split second away from something falling through you. The figure was so close I could see frost glittering on his hood. He lifted his hand and it didn't look right. Not gloves. Not bearskin. The shape of it was wrong. Too many knuckles or not enough, like looking at your reflection in a spoon and trying to pretend it's normal. Sir, I said, because manners are a spine when fear tries to take yours. Do you need assistance? We can get you warm and inside. He waved that wrong hand and turned a little like he was listening to the pipe. Then he leaned into it, slow as a nod. He leaned, and the parka brushed the steel and I heard it. Not through my ears, but somehow under my ribs. A soft, sticky peel like tape coming off skin. Then he wasn't leaning. He was gone, not exploded into mist. Not a magic trick. Gone like I'd lost him in a blink. The light we cast showed no figure, only our breath, the slow steam we make. The boot prints touched the pipe and then didn't exist on the other side of it. Vic swore softly, a prayer in a language I didn't know he had. The line knocked 3 times. My radio hissed and coughed and played a clip of me saying copy heading back east again. And then someone said my name in a voice that was Danny's voice but not quite tuned right, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Nate, it said, drawn a hair too long. Nayate. We stumbled back to the truck and the retreat felt like pulling yourself out of a thick drink. In the cab, doors shut, heater blasting full, I felt childish tears sting my eyes because the heater hurt my cheeks and I needed something dumb like that to latch onto. Vic's hands shook when he keyed the radio. He told Sloan we had a visual on a person whose tracks disappeared at the pipeline. He said it like a grown-up. She told us to stand down and return. She told us to breathe slow and count to 6, and we did. An hour later, back at camp, Henderson wanted us in the briefing room. He had a printout of the camera still. It showed 2 halos of light, the pipeline a smear like someone had challenged the lens with a thumb. He tried to talk us through it like we were children who'd glimpsed their first card trick. Elena came in and pushed snacks at us. She touched my wrist again. The body keeps a record, she said under her breath. Hot shower, food, sleep, the mind will catch up later. I tried to do exactly that. I tried to let the body write over the previous page. In the shower, the water drumbeat on the plastic curtain sounded like 3 knocks separated by a breath. On the way back to the room, I walked past Danny and he looked at me too steady. You hear your own voice out there? He asked. Yeah, I heard mine last week, he said. It said my name like my mom. She passed in June. It said it like she was upstairs and dinner was ready. I told him not to screw around with me. He walked away and the back of his jacket looked like it belonged to someone shorter. That's not an observation that makes sense. It's what I saw. Up there, scale is unreliable. Distance is a liar. The mind helps it along. We had a storm the next night. Not snow, exactly. More like the air went to war with itself and forgot how to be still. You couldn't see 10 feet except in short, mean bursts. Sloan radioed a general advisory. Stand down unless alarms trip. If they trip, you respond with 2 trucks, tethering, safety lines, the whole kit. We settled into the kind of waiting that makes your guts heavy. An alarm tripped. Differential pressure again. Same stretch, near 8. In the meeting room, the map looked innocent. A line with little squares. In the truck, the map was a guess we drove into the teeth of. Vic drove. I watched what the world decided to show us. A flash of the pipeline, a smash of snow. Our own lights coming back to us from the forks of the fin radiators. When we cut the engine, it didn't feel like the world was quiet. It felt like we'd switched to another world where the rules of sound didn't include us. We tethered to the truck. We counted steps.
5-10, stop.
I took the thermal camera out from under my coat and spun it lazy, the way Elena had taught me so I wouldn't get fixated on anything. I got a blob of bright for the pipeline. I got the invisible shoulders of Vic when he turned. And then to the north, a heat signature that was not the line, not a truck, not us. The outline of a person was quick and neat, like a paper cutout pasted to the screen. The person lifted an arm, held it out to the pipeline, and the image bled bright. Too bright, like it had opened and was letting the hot in. Got a live one, I said. 10 o'clock, 20 yards, moving toward the line. We moved. The figure did not move away, it waited. The thermal put a white crown on its head where the hood should have been. I thought of the first-grade cutouts my kid made with round heads and bodies that were cones. The air tasted like pennies. 3 knocks in the line, slow as breaths. I kept the camera on it on him because I needed the comfort of a reading I could name. Even if my brain knew the camera didn't care if it was a man or a mistake. The figure touched the pipeline. The heat flared exactly like you expect if a warm thing touches a warmer thing. The way your handprints fade on a hood you shouldn't have leaned on. Then the figure leaned, and the head shape, circle, stupid neat, cut in half against the steel, and then it wasn't a head shape anymore. It was a smear. Then it was nothing. The camera showed the residual glow on the pipe where the touch had been. No footprints. Ours and none other. I took a step without meaning to, and the safety line jerked me back. Vic grabbed my arm hard. Stop, he said. And I heard his voice trying to snag mine like a fish before it gets into a fast piece of river. From inside the pipeline, deep but not far, there came a sound. I don't know if a human throat can make it. It wasn't a cry and it wasn't a word. It was a tone. A low vowel sound like someone trying to get their mouth around help without teeth. It went on longer than breath and stopped too quick for an engine. I felt it in my teeth the way music can find the work you had done 10 years ago and remind the nerves they're temporary. We retreated and reported, and security locked that stretch down for 2 days. Sloan ran the playback for us in the briefing room, and it was worse as a video than it had been as a life. The flare of heat, the disappearance, the smear. Henderson wrote a report that had the word refraction in it 5 times. Elena wrote me a note that said simply, "Tell your body you survived. Sometimes you have to address the machine by name and let it stop shaking." A day later, we found a lunchbox on the dash of our truck when we came out of the trailer. One of those dented steel ones like a tiny coffin. Frost on it, a rim of it, delicate as eyelashes. No footprints on the hood. No footprints on the step. Just the box like it had decided on us the way lightning picks the one tree with the least people around it. Vic opened it because that's who he is. Inside, a thermos with a cracked plastic cup cap, empty. A folded paper towel, stiff as a shingle. A Polaroid with 3 men in parkas next to a section of the pipeline. One holding up a gloved thumb. One with his hood down in the cold, like he wanted to be seen properly. On the back, in pencil, in the kind of handwriting men used to practice in school. Henderson plus Vickers, March 79. Vic's last name is Vickers. He didn't need me to read it out loud. He didn't say a word. He put the photo back and shut the lid, and we sat in the truck with the heater up until the windshield fogged and cleared and fogged again. "Family?" I said low. "Not that I know," he said eventually. "Henderson, though. That's a name that repeats." We brought it inside, and Henderson, the foreman, took it with a look like someone had swapped the paper in his hands for a fish. He said we shouldn't keep personal effects in fleet vehicles. He said a lot of things he says when the world leans and he tries to push it upright with paragraphs. That night, the box reappeared on our dash. Same frost, same photo. On the back now, someone had written, "You stopped. Good." My last night of that hitch, the sky finally decided to go full theater. The aurora came down like green curtains, and the stars seemed to push back against it. Stubborn. We had no calls, no alarms. We sat in the truck with the engine idling low, and the radio behaving like equipment behaves when the cold isn't killing it. Danny knocked on the window and asked if we wanted the good coffee from Elena's stash. We said yes. He jogged toward the trailer, and his shadow paced him, regular and boring, and I felt safer for how dull it looked. He turned back and yelled, "You guys gonna be here in 10? His voice carried weird, like the air put its hand on it and slowed it down. "We're not going anywhere," Vic yelled back. "Don't say that," Danny said. He laughed. "Don't ever say that up here." He disappeared into the light. I watched the pipeline and thought about the way it hums. 1.5 million miles of petroleum talking to itself through metal. A joke, I know. But my brain wanted a number, so it made one. Vic said, "Just in case, don't whistle." "Wasn't going to," I said. And we both smiled because we're not completely eaten by superstition, even though we were, a little. The radio clicked. Sloane's voice, but quiet, like she was talking through gloved hands. "Status check," I keyed. "All good." Another click, a breath. Then my voice said, "Copy, heading back east," and the little hairs at the back of my neck pulled tight. The truck heater coughed. Something tapped the hood. 1, 2, 3, like a polite person at a door who knows you're inside. We didn't look. We didn't move. We waited until Elena came back with coffee and Danny with a slice of pie wrapped in foil. And we let our bodies remember that sugar is a small kind of heat. When I flew out 2 days later, my ears popped on the descent and didn't unpop until Anchorage. In the hotel, the pipes knocked in the bathroom. 3, pause, 3. I laughed at myself in the mirror and sounded like somebody else. At home, my son put a toy car on my stomach and drove it over the hill my bad diet made and told me I smelled like snow. My wife asked if I was coming back next hitch, and I told her the money's the money. I told her the truth. I didn't tell her about the sound the pipeline makes if you stand downwind and listen for the thing inside it that wants the shape of your name. There's one last thing. I almost didn't include it because it feels like the part in a story where you make something up for effect. Only I don't need effect, and it didn't feel like a flourish when it happened. It felt like static. I downloaded my dash cam clips onto my laptop to see if I'd caught anything worth showing Danny as a joke on myself. A fox, a weird shadow. I clicked through nights of nothing. Headlights, steam. A bright insect of a snowflake at the lens. Then, on the night with the storm, I found a piece where the truck was idling, facing the line. The audio is always garbage, wind, a coil whine, the engine. In that clip, you can hear 3 knocks through the wind. You can also hear my voice say, "Copy, heading back east," even though I'm not speaking. Over it, faint, A voice that could be mine if I'd learned to pronounce my own name with the emphasis wrong, stretching the first syllable thin, Nayati. It's not dramatic. It's barely there. It's the kind of thing you can play for someone and they'll say, "That's just wind." And you'll agree because the alternative is something you can't pack for or log. At the very end of the clip, right before the file ends, the aurora brightened like someone turned a dimmer, and for a second, the pipeline threw a shadow that looked like a man leaning into it. The shadow was me-sized, or Vic-sized, or anybody-sized. The point is, it wasn't a bear or a post. It was the outline of a person with one arm out. You can say it's a trick of light. It probably is. I hope it is. My son came into the room just then and asked who I was watching. I told him nobody. I'm writing this now on my day off with the heater bumping in the vent and my boots leaving little wet continents on the mat by the door. I'll go back next hitch because I'm not brave and I'm not smart, just someone who needs what the nights pay. If you ask me to point at where the weirdness started, I'll say mile 9. 2 weeks into the schedule, a man waving like a reasonable person asking for reasonable help. If you ask me to point at where it ends, I can't. The last thing my radio said on my last night before I shut it off and slid it into the charger. A click, a breath, and then my voice, too slow by a hair, saying, "Copy, coming." I left it there because that's where it belongs. On a shelf, waiting to be picked up by whoever's on nights next. If you end up working up there and a stranger waves you in from the edge of light, you do what the handbook says. You call it in. You tether. You don't touch steel. You keep your manners to yourself. You look at the prints and you think about how some tracks don't go both ways. You tell your body you survived. You let your mind take its time catching up, and if the pipeline knocks in 3s when you're home later, you ignore it and you do not. No matter how much your bones itch to be polite, you do not knock back.